All right, looks like we have a quorum. Everyone is here. So we'll go ahead and start. We did not have any actions in closed session to be read out. So we'll move on to invocation led by Trustee Wright and the Pledge of Allegiance by Trustee Jay.
Trustee Prendergast, I need to read the welcome.
Oh, the disclaimer, yes, go ahead.
Good evening and welcome to our Zoom board meeting of the South Orange County Community College District Board of Trustees. This is our 7th virtual Board of Trustees meeting using the Zoom webinar meeting platform. Please be advised that everyone participating via this Zoom webinar has been muted. Trustees TJ Prendergast, Tim Jamal, James Wright, David Lang, Barbara J., Marcia Milchiker, Carrie Witt-Rigel, and student trustee Ethan Banafi have been designated as panelists. All attendees are able to view the meeting and may be unmuted when asked to speak. Panelists may also communicate via the chat feature with President Prendergast, as well as Vice Chancellor Gable, who is the host of the meeting. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Trustee Prendergast, who will call the meeting to order.
Yes, again. Sorry about that. All right, so no actions taken in closed session. Invocation by Trustee Wright. Pledge of Allegiance by Trustee Jay. So please rise.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for gathering us together in this board meeting. We again thank thee for the freedoms that we have and to live in this great land of America. We again pray for those who are suffering the physical, emotional, and economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We ask thee to continue to bless and inspire our leaders and their efforts to protect the health and well-being of all people. We pray for those who are experiencing the wildfire burns in our great state of California. Bless them and help them. We are thankful for our students and our dedicated faculty, administration, and staff in our community college district. Bless our Board of Trustees, our chancellors, and all in attendance in our discussions and efforts this evening. We sincerely pray for guidance and do so humbly in his name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Agenda here. Next we have, so then we'll go ahead and do 3.1 oral reports. We'll start with board reports. I'll just go in order I see on the screen here. Trustee Milchiker.
Today I'm concentrating on just 2 exceptional virtual meetings I attended, presented by our very own 2 college president. I think their messages, though they're bowdlerized a bit by me to keep them short, are very important. First, Dr. John Hernandez, president of Irvine Valley College, spoke at a recent trustee weekly webinar. He had just over 30 days on the job. I was so proud when he shared with all the trustees in the state that IVC has truly a caring culture, and that's true. He was proud of IVC's mission statement and the strategic goals, which put student inclusion and access in its very first sentence. He was pleased of our timely board resolutions, one denouncing xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment, and the other in support of people of color. And IVC's classified employees have initiated the Caring Campus program, and IVC has an equity and inclusion center and inclusive marketing, and he urged all boards and faculty and administrators to work together, and I agree with that also. Then the Saddleback College president, Elliot Stern, at his recent foundation president's circle, commenced the meeting with a virtual tour of the new stadium and tennis complex. Wow. The gorgeous mountains provide the perfect backdrop to these incredible sports complexes. Also, we saw the new Advanced Technology and Advanced Science building. It's now where the old tennis courts were, and it beautifully blends in with the newer science buildings, which is my favorite, of course. And there's going to be 350 to 400 additional parking spaces, which will make the students happy when the pandemic ends. And data demonstrate that Saddleback's online classes are exceptional. In spite of the pandemic, enrollments are up. Greater than 500 faculty have completed online training. More than 7,000 students have gotten online tutoring, and now tutoring is available 24/7. And Saddleback's new initiative, the Zero Textbook Cost, or ZTC, have more than 41% of their students enduring no textbook cost at all. And this is the best in the state. And then the new ASG president, Adam Brownell, spoke beautifully about how the professors at Saddleback have saved his life, mentioning Professor Scott Farthing, and Emily Quinlan, and Counselor Roy Amenzoud. And you could find more fabulous stats in President Stern's President's Report in today's agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Jay.
Yes, indeed. On Tuesday, September the 15th, I attended the IVC Foundation Board of Governors. It was virtual, the governor's meeting. They had a number of new and exciting events and activities happening and a few impressive accomplishments, which I am going to share with you. On October 22nd, the anniversary of IVC's founding, the IVC Foundation will hold their inaugural Day of Giving, similar to the Giving Tuesday. This event will take place via social media and is intended to be both a fundraiser and a fundraiser. As you recall, last year, the IVC Foundation Awards dinner got canceled 2 days before it was scheduled to occur due to COVID. During this meeting, we heard about the creative events they are scheduling for this year, celebrating excellence for March 13th. They are planning a two-part event. The first part will be a drive-through celebration, most likely at IVC, which promises to be a lot of fun. For those who wish to enjoy dinner catered by Tulip Rose, it will be available for pickup. Next, they are hosting a live streamed event, which will include the popular fun, a scholarship and live auction. One of the live auction items will be a dessert a month, prepared by our very own IVC Foundation Executive Director, Elsa Oransky. I can vouch for the fact that this is definitely worth bidding on, as I've been fortunate enough to enjoy her goodies at the board meetings. Finally, over the past 5 years, the IVC Foundation has focused on growing their endowment. As of August 31st this year, the balance was over 1.63 million and growing. In September, they added another new endowment and received word that they would be receiving a 5-figure gift of stock to add to their existing endowment. Needless to say, the board members and the office team have been quite busy, and our students benefit tremendously from all their hard work. Thank you.
Trustee Lang.
I'm terribly saddened by the recent death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the greatest legal scholars and minds this country has ever known, and encourage Board President Prendergast to adjourn tonight's meeting in her honor. A fearless advocate for gender equality was Justice Ginsburg, but one of the traits I admired most about the notorious RBG was her ability to have friendly relationships, even with those she ardently disagreed with on important issues of the day, like Justice Anthony Scalia. I'm also saddened by the rush to appoint Justice Ginsburg's successor. Justice Ginsburg will be greatly missed. On a happier note, I want to wish all of our Jewish constituents Shana Tova, the traditional Rosh Hashanah holiday greeting, and a safe and fulfilling New Year's with the upcoming Yom Kippur holiday. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Wright.
I want to make a short report on a couple of things that happened. At Irvine Valley College and Saddleback College, they both co-hosted a virtual college fair on Tuesday, September the 15th via Zoom to provide students with the opportunities to learn about transferring to the four-year universities. The fair was represented by various Cal State universities, University of California's, University of Californians, California private schools, universities, and some out-of-state universities. I also want to recognize that IVC has and welcome their new Vice President for Student Services. Her name is Dr. Martha McDonald. Two McDonalds as Vice Presidents. Dr. McDonald is a bilingual in Spanish and English, and is a veteran in the United States Marine Corps, and possesses a doctorate in educational leadership. And then I wanted to just comment for a little bit about some things that are happening at Saddleback College, as far as there's an exciting time on their campus. The stadium and tennis centers projects have been completed, and they're starting to build a new building for the applied science. It's the Advanced Technology Applied Science Building. And then the Gateway Building will probably be starting on that next year. And then they've also decided that they're going to build a math and science building starting in 2 years from now, which will, this new facility will take care of the science math building right now. Thank you.
Trustee Rydell.
Yes, I attended the foundation's new meeting. I preferred using Zoom, so I missed the tour of the stadium, but we did see part of it on the air, and it was it really was a very good meeting. Actually, it was a retreat, and a lot was said, a lot was shared, and it was very productive. I also will attend the book club meeting that's coming up this Friday, and I'm looking forward to that. I also wanted to share with everyone that we will have a virtual gala for Saddleback College on November the 20th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. More to come on that. So for the sake of time, I'll give it away.
Trustee Jamal.
Okay, I'll try not to be repetitive here, but I wanted to thank those firefighters and others who have been working around the clock to contain these horrible blazes in California and other states and sparing human life. It's I think all of us have seen the skies, even around Southern California, being so ominous the last few weeks, and I thank them for that. I also want to take a moment to thank the faculty for what they did last spring, converting, I think, over 2,000 courses from in-person to online. That is a very difficult effort, and I know it's challenging this fall, and I do appreciate the work that they've done on that so far. It was mentioned the stadium at Saddleback and the tennis courts. That's a very significant milestone. Congratulations for that. I'm glad to see that the IVC Foundation is reviving its planned giving program. That's awesome news, and I think the IVC Foundation and both Saddleback Foundations are in a great place. And lastly, I know Trustee Lang mentioned it, the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, obviously a champion and leader on gender equality and women's rights. I spend my days surrounded by smart, intelligent women. And I think more women at the tables where decisions are being made is good, and we'd be better off for that to continue. So I concur with the suggestion to adjourn the meeting in her name tonight. Thank you.
All right. I guess a benefit or a disadvantage of going last, depending on your perspective, is that everything else has pretty much been said. So I have no report to add to any of that. So with that, we'll go to student trustee Manafi.
So I want to start my report by adding to what Trustee Lang and Jamal said. I want to say how deeply sorry I am to lose Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a human rights icon and inspiration to all of us. This is a sad time in our history, and our lives would have not been the same without her tireless work to achieve equality. I spent the past 3 weeks gathering data and research on how we can reduce more to vote and increase student voter turnout. I had a meeting with Chancellor Berg on September 4th on the ways out of schools could promote civic engagement. Following that, I had several meetings with ASIVC and AHO Saddleback and we discussed items such as hosting civic engagement virtual events, making a video representation on how to register to vote and cast your ballot in Orange County. And we also contacted Academic Senate of IVC and Saddleback, encouraging faculty to provide extra credit to students who attend civic engagement events and other recommendations for students on election day, such as rescheduling any quizzes or exams. SIVC President and Vice President also presented some methods to increase voter registration that are adopted by other schools and showed substantial success to IVC marketing, and we are having a follow-up meeting on those items this week. On September 17th, I attended the Saddleback Mascot Student Forum, in which students discussed the racist background of the Gacho, why the mascot needs to be replaced, and came up with a list of their suggested replacements. I was impressed by Dr. Sinner's efforts to hold discussions with faculty, students, and even the community, and granting everyone a chance to have their voices heard. Lastly, I attended the Community College League of California meeting on September 17 to discuss elections and Prop 15 and 16 on California ballots. Thank you.
Sorry, I clicked that. Next, we have ASG, IVC. Do we have anyone represent or Academic Senate? No, ASG, IVC, or Saddleback?
Yes, so we have Adam Burnell and
Well, we're presenting our budget and goals shortly, so I'll reserve my report for our presentation.
Okay.
And I don't see what happened to Brianna. Something must have happened with Brianna Ross, IVC.
Yeah, she must have dropped. Okay, so then next we have Saddleback College Academic Senate.
I am here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, trustees. Good evening, Chancellor Burke and vice chancellors. We're in our 6th week of instruction. It's impossible. It's going so fast. I'm kind of glad it's going fast. It's getting us closer to being back on campus some semester soon. I want to tell you how impressed I am with our faculty and their hard work teaching online. So I've had some chats with the professors in my department, and they're like, how do we connect? How do we make this work? And I go, it's like being in class, but add about 50% more energy. You've got to engage them. So this is about my 11th hour Zooming today. I am so ready for a nap or something. I'm not sure what, but I'm so impressed with how hard our faculty are working to give students an experience online and on Zoom that gets hopefully somewhat close to being on campus. Yesterday, I was actually on campus doing some lesson prep in the classroom. It felt like a science fiction movie where you go someplace and everything's exactly the way it was 6-7 months ago. That was the classroom, a little bit spooky. I want to commend the Saddleback Police. I came out with some materials to take home and use, and they were right there watching me. They're like, what are you doing? Hi, it's me, taking stuff home to work with for classes. So they're on top of it also. I want to thank classified and administrative personnel for how well they're supporting our students in this also. We had a DRAC meeting last week, KIC meeting coming up this week. We are working hard to make the campus an even better place, and I'm thankful for that. And also, I'm thankful that the board is going to be revisiting the guest speakers on campus and getting that squared away. So I appreciate that. So that's our report from Saddleback. Thank you.
Okay, IVC, Academic Senate.
Item 6.6 on tonight's agenda rescinds a board policy which passed at the last board meeting. I want to thank the board for that rescission when it eventually happens. As the board may know, both college academic senates passed an identical resolution demanding revocation of that eventually what had passed as BP 6140. So that problem is solved. And I want to thank the board again for solving that problem. But my comments tonight are to try and unpack how that even took place. How could a board of trustees, elected officials, not understand the collaborative work it took to get from both colleges to get any version of BP 6140 to them, and to have the board so drastically change it in violation of so many rules and laws and of their own duties? And that if the board understood that collaborative process, the board would have acted differently the first time and not have to rescind it. So my question is, why was the process going through BPAR, going through the board policy and regs council? Why was that process not respected and followed? I can only guess what the answer is, but after observing you all for 3.5 years, my answer to myself is that you do not understand your job. I educated myself and began to review the 2019 trustee handbook created by the Community College League of California. Page 23, and please let me know if you would like a copy of this document. Quote, the most important board responsibility is to make good policy, which then provides guidance for college staff. Just a few more quotes. The system works best when trustees focus their efforts on representing community interests through the policies they adopt. The policies are most effective when they, the board, delegate the day-to-day operations to the CEO and the college staff, end quote, because the CEO and staff members have the expertise to implement board policy. I am confused. I think my personal opinion and my professional opinion after working in this district and sitting in this seat is that you didn't understand the process, and shame on you. Go back to school and read your trustee handbook. And at the next board meeting, my comments will focus on prayer at public meetings. Thank you.
Trustee Prendergast, we now have Brianna Ross, if you want to skip back up to the ASG reports for IVC.
Yes, that's fine.
So I'll give my report pretty quickly. So we now have all 5 justices seated on our judicial court. My executive vice president and I went through quite an enlightening process in interviewing so many individuals. There was about 30 who were interested in the position. Sadly, we could only pick 5, but we're really excited about this cohort of individuals, and we believe that they will bring some amazing changes to our campus in the way that our grievance processes work. And so we're on our way to having one of our first judicial court meetings where they will select a chair who will be the Chief Justice. Currently, we are holding our elections for 9 new senator positions, and that is one of the most exciting things to me because it is a big change from previous years where we elected all of our senators in the spring. Now we have left 9 positions for the fall semester that gives first years and other students opportunities to participate on campus. We also had a very successful virtual club day. We had a great turnout with so many students, and it was super interactive. I myself was unable to attend because of a class conflict, but I've heard so many great things, and I just really, I give so many props to my vice president, our ICC chair. She did an amazing job in putting this on. And we also have 3 specific ASIVC committees that we are using to channel our creativity and brainstorm for more engaging online events for our students. One of them is our website improvement committee. So we'll be focusing on how we want to represent ourselves as ASIVC through the website, and that's especially critical because of this virtual environment we are in. And we want it to be really a resource for students to learn more about us and about how they can get engaged and better their undergraduate experience at IVC. Next, we have our upcoming events committee. We focus on events like what we're going to do for our Fear Fest event that usually happens around Halloween, how to get students participating in that, and just other events that come along in the semester. The last one is a very recently created one. This is our ASIVC Civic Engagement Committee, and I'm really excited about that because I attended a civic engagement campus-wide meeting. It was pretty enlightening, and I hope that we can take a lot of the events and ideas even further and learn how we can better get more IVC students involved with that. And that's why I really strongly felt that ASIVC needed to be a part of that process. So we actually created our own civic engagement committee where we will brainstorm those ideas, and then the few individuals that are part of the campus-wide one will bring those ideas and see how we can integrate that with the other plans that we have. That'll be all from me. Thank you for letting me come back to my report.
Okay, next we have Faculty Association.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Trustee Jamal for recognizing the complexity of moving from face-to-face instruction to online instruction for roughly 2,500 classes or somewhere in that number, and echo my colleague Blake Stevens' comments about the challenges that faculty members are facing and surmounting as we continue in this online mode. I think it's important to point out, although many people who have not taught sometimes assume that teaching online is easier because we get to sit at home, I can tell you from personal experience that it is much more complex, much more time consuming, and requires a tremendous amount of energy. And as we approach the midterms of this semester already, we have a tremendous number of full-time and part-time faculty members who are struggling to maintain their own disrupted lives while conducting their classes and doing an excellent job, even though many of them are paying a price in both exhaustion and emotional trouble. Part 2 of this report, tonight on the board agenda is the initial bargaining proposal, or the sunshine proposal, for both the Faculty Association and the district proposals for our upcoming contract negotiations. The Faculty Association looks forward to a quick and successful resolution of the contract negotiations and establishing a new contract before we terminate the old one in June. Particularly of interest to the Faculty Association in this negotiation, as in the past, is achieving pay parity for our part-time colleagues who teach close to half of the classes on the campuses and who are required to have the same professional and academic accomplishments as their full-time colleagues, but nevertheless are paid just slightly more than half the pay for the same work. And so we would like to make sure that the board and the public are aware of that discrepancy and our efforts to remediate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Next we have Irvine Valley Classified Senate.
Okay, so good evening. We have already kicked off a very productive fall semester, been involved in shared governance meetings, and we've also kicked off some professional development. We've launched our year-long professional development with Franklin Covey. This is a virtual online leadership training where all of our classified at IVC will have access to training modules to help in their leadership and soft skills training. Our classified senate is facilitating one of the modules called 5 Choices with Learning Lunches each month with our classified. As we continue to work remotely, we have boosted our online connections with our classified with additional learning lunches in the areas of health and wellness. remote technology training, for example, Zoom and MS Teams, soft skills trainings, and much more. We've also launched a monthly newsletter where we're building upon our communication regarding updates. We'll also be continuing monthly chats, classified chats with our new president, John Hernandez, which will also now include our vice presidents and executive director of marketing and creative services. We are looking forward to these monthly chats with our administration to stay connected and up to date on current developments concerning our campus, students, distance learning, COVID-19, health and safety precautions, and our overall college community. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Saddleback College Classified Senate.
They are not present.
Okay. CSEA.
I think he submitted a written report. Oh, so Scott submitted a written report that you will find in your budget book.
Okay. Then I assume we don't have POA. There are no board requests for reports. So moving on to 4.1, district adopted budget.
Okay, yeah, so tonight we have a presentation on the district adopted budget, and we have Kim McCord and, you can't see it. No, you can't see it. Kim McCord, Corey Watson, and David Kakatrian are primarily going to be the ones that are doing the presentation for us. All right, so Kim is going to kick it off for us.
Yes, I am. Good evening, everybody. So we'll step right into it. Can we go to slide 2, please? There we go. First off, we always like to go over our board philosophy on budget, and that is to ensure the wise and prudent use of our public resources, promote financial strength and stability for our district, and maximize educational opportunities for our students. So these are 10 budget development guidelines. There's more details about each one of these in the budget book, but you just need to know that we did follow all of these guidelines as we developed our fiscal year 2021 adopted. So this is a slide of our actual summary for 1920, that year we just completed. If you look at the first line, that's our unrestricted general fund operating budget. You can see we had started last year with $77.5 million. We had almost $308 million of revenues, expenses of $309 million. So we had an ending balance of $76.7 million in our unrestricted general fund. You can see all the funds that are listed there. So overall for our district-wide and all funds, we started the year with $522 million and ended the year with $548 million. The biggest chunk of those funds, of course, are in our capital outlay fund. Sorry, thanks, Emery. The next slide. So this slide goes over the changes in our beginning fund balance that we estimated at our tentative budget to where we really ended. You can see both colleges increase based on savings of expenses and additional revenues that came in. Our basic aid increased due to the final property taxes we received, and our district-wide increase mostly from additional interest revenues we received. These are some of our assumptions for our revenues for the current year. It's based on our state enacted budget, except for the COLA and growth, as the state did not fund those. You can see in the next section, we funded those ourselves with our basic aid funds. That was a COLA of 2.31% and growth of 0.48%. And we still continue to be a hold harmless district, and there's $4.9 million for that. Our estimated property tax revenues are at 2.5%. And we have our non-resident tuition, which is a large portion of our local money that's just under 95%. It is down because of our COVID-19 impacts. Some other assumptions are our categorical funding is based on the advanced apportionment from the state. We typically get some adjustments through the year. Our EPA funds are estimated at $2.65 million. Those are budgeted for part-time faculty salaries and benefits. We have our lottery revenue in the unrestricted fund at $4.2 million. And interest income is down $1 million from last year and is estimated at $2 million. So our basic aid allocations at tentative budget, you may recall, the state was projecting some large cuts to our categorical programs, and we had planned to backfill those with basic aid funds. Luckily, those cuts were not part of the final state budget, so we were able to remove that backfill funds. And with the additional taxes we received at year end, we were able to add $10 million to the IVC Student Services Building project. Now we'll go over the student-centered funding formula calculations. This first part is how we get paid for our student counts, our credit, non-credit, and special admit FTES. You can see that's 120 million. So that's 3 million higher than we had last year, mostly due to the change in rates that were solidified for the 1920 budget. And the second section is the supplemental. That's for our Pell, AB 540, and Promise Grant student counts. And that was just slightly lower than where we were last year. Next slide. This, I know, is a lot of very small numbers, but it is all of the counts for each of those areas that we get funded for student success. And it's a 3-year average now from the prior 3 years. You can see that's at $16.5 million. And that's just slightly down from last year as well, based on the change in rates. So this is the summary of the funding. Our total computational revenue based on those categories is $157 million. The calculation for our hold harmless is to take the 1920 plus COLA. The state COLA was 0, so that is really the same calculation as we had last year for the state, $161.9 million, which gives us our hold harmless amount of 4.9. You can see the orange and blue lines are the COLA and growth we funded. And that takes us to the purple line, which is our adjusted funding that we funded is $166.5 million. And that's a $4.5 million increase over the prior year. So these numbers are used as part of our DRAC model. So we'll go through that calculation now. That the first line here is that SCFF revenue that we just covered. Then we add in our non-resident tuition, local revenue, and state revenue district-wide. That includes interest and the ground lease in the local area, and the state includes the EPA and lottery and full-time faculty funds we receive. So then we get a subtotal of those revenue allocations. And on this slide, then we add in where we ended the year last year. A district-wide ending balance is that 18 million. And we reestablish our contingency of 14.5 million. We cover our district-wide general expenses, and then we fund district services at 9.34%. And those numbers then carry forward to this top line, net available funds. We add in the local income. The majority of that is our reimbursement of our pension stabilization funds for each of our locations, and local revenue such as facility rentals for the colleges. And then there's a small service fee for the district offices. So our total sources of funds at the right-hand side is 220.8 million. And then we add in our location ending balances, which gives us a total available funds of 253 million. Now onto the expenditure side. Here's some of our assumptions. We do have all of our step-in column and negotiated increases. You can see the different rates there that were applied for each group. We have our adjusted PERS and STIRS rates that were adjusted down based on some contributions from the state to both of those pensions. Our health and welfare was only a 1% increase, so we're very fortunate that those rates continue to stay in the low level. Our unemployment and workers' comp just slightly changed, and our property and liability just went up to 1.2 million. For reserves, we have the economic uncertainty, our general reserve, as we said before, 14.5 million. And then we have our reserve for unrealized tax collections. That's 20% of just the excess portion of our property taxes, and that's 18.1 million. So this is an overview of the whole adopted budget. Again, I'll first look at that top line, the unrestricted general fund for our operating funds. So we're starting with 76.7 million. We have revenues of 306 million, expenditures of 324.5 million, which is a deficit of 18.4 million. and showing an ending balance projected at 58.3 million. Overall, for district-wide, we started with 548 million. We plan to have a deficit of 328 million. And the largest chunk of that, of course, is what we budget for our capital outlay projects that are fully budgeted to be spent, although most projects will not. We won't have them all completed by June 30th. And that leaves us with a district-wide estimated balance of 220 million. This is just more detail on the expense side. So for our unrestricted fund, we have 202 million in salaries and benefits, 25 million in our supplies and services, just a small 252,000 in cap outlay, and then almost 97 million in payments to students and other uses. The bulk of that is our transfer to our capital outlay fund for our basic aid projects there, and also the transfer for our OPEB trust and our pension stability trust. So you can see that total is 324 million we saw on the previous page. We have a couple of trend slides next. This is the district-wide ending balance trend. You can see 18-19 and 19-20 were very similar, about 77 million. And we are projecting for the budget year to go down to 58 million. And that's, we have some planned uses for some one-time funds that came in during 19-20. So this is a trend in our revenues and expenses. 19-20, we did have some high state revenues. You can see we had a large increase of over 34%. We had some one-time funds in that budget. So in the 2021 year, we don't expect to have those one-time funds. And so you can see a reduction. And our overall revenue just is showing a slight decrease. On the expense side, they continue to go up for salaries and benefits, of course. The one line that you'll see stand out is other operating expenses. This is a larger number, over 50% increase. This is where we budget a lot of departmental operating funds that may or may not get used. I know we had some savings because folks aren't traveling right now and we aren't having as many on-campus meetings that are funded. So while those may not all get spent, they are still allocated for each of the department's use. And now I'm going to turn it over to Corey Wathen to go over the Saddleback College.
Good evening. Last year, President Stern updated the board on the structural deficit that resulted from implementing the new state funding formula and presented the college's short and long-term plans to stabilize and balance the budget. Tonight, I will update the board on the work the college has done in the last year to implement that plan. While the structural deficit has not been totally eliminated in the midst of the pandemic, over the last 18 months, the college has collectively worked very hard to implement the plan laid out by President Stern last year and stabilize the budget, as I will show in the next few slides. So we'll start out with the FTS trend. Here you'll see that FTS overall is fairly stable over this period of time, but you do see a little bit of reduction going down to 18-19. And then this last year in 19-20, we've worked hard to increase that, which was part of our plan to adjust, to increase revenue and balance the budget. You'll see a 1.39% increase overall and a 2.6% increase in the credit FTS from 18-19 to 19-20. We do have a funding cap in our growth formula at 0.5%. So you'll see the numbers in the 2021 reflect the limited growth based on the cap for 19-20 plus a 0.48% growth for 2021 that's included in the budget. Next slide. So the ending balance trend tells a tale. If you start in the 16-17 to 17-18 year, you see there was a $2 million decrease in our ending balance. So we realized that the college budget was somewhat tenuous at that time. When we were looking at 2018-19 in the third quarter of that year, we noticed that we were projecting about a $3 million deficit in that year. So the college took immediate action to reverse that and ended the 18-19 year with a $1.5 million surplus. So, collective immediate action led by President Stern and the college collectively resulted in that. And then you look at 1920, there's a big spike in ending balance. And I'll talk about how and why that occurred in the next few slides. In the 2021, right now, we're forecasting about $3 million deficit. In a normal year, if things were stable, I would say that we could probably recover that shortage or get very close based on typical savings that are in the budget. But due to COVID and a lot of other factors that are unusual right now, we're not sure exactly where we'll come in, but we're trying to employ the same cost saving measures as to the extent that we can, and utilizing restricted revenue to cover as much of our unrestricted expenses as possible as well. So next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the revenue and expense trends. You'll see total revenue, fairly stable through 18, 19. Then you'll see the spike that I talked about in 1920. So there was a lot of both continuing and one-time funding that was added, seeing that the state revenue under the new formula was going to be lower. We were initially going into that year thinking that we were going to be significantly shorter revenue, but some additional funding sources were added. So most of that one time. So, we were intentional about trying to save those funds because we knew that they wouldn't continue. And you'll see in the 2021 year, the total revenue is down $2 million. So you start to see things level out. And then if you look at the total expenditure line, I'll highlight a couple of things. If you look at the 17-18 year, we're just over $104 million. And then you look at 1920, we were at $104.6 million. So over that period of time, we had two COLAs on the revenue side that would have accounted to about just over 6% increase in cost of living. But at the same time, we're holding our expenses at 0.55% over that 2-year period. So significant savings in our budget due to intentional efforts there. Next slide. So this slide highlights the accomplishments, which I've referred to in the previous slides. So the increase in FTS, the student-centered funding formula outcomes, we've increased that 5.7%, trying to do as much as we can there to minimize the hold harmless amount that we're guaranteed funding for. We do have a 0.5% growth limit. A couple of the strategies, obviously reducing expenses any way we can. So we've been leveraging vacant positions, improving productivity, utilizing COVID funding and COVID savings in the last quarter of last year, and then using restricted and capital outlay funds as much as we can, including, as I said, the COVID money. We've established some solid budget principles and goals. So we're evaluating all expenditures and resource allocations on the basis of how they contribute towards student success and our specific strategic outcomes. And then, as I said, the outcomes, we added $1.5 million in the end of 18-19, and then 5.1 million added to reserves in 1920. Next slide. So that kind of addresses the how we achieved what we've achieved so far. This is the why. So there's significant challenges that we still face. As I mentioned, total revenue is down $2 million this year, while continuing to, and that includes a cost of living increase as well as some growth that's included in our DRAC calculation this year. But on the positive side, those contributed towards ongoing revenue going up by $1 million. But long term, looking at our FTS and the stability of the state funding and other things, gives us cause for concern. Certainly with the governor's May revise proposal that would have cut us 8% at all of our categorical programs, we're concerned what that could mean in the future years, even though that didn't take place this year because they use the deferral options. We have significant revenue losses due to the campus being closed from parking, the Child Development Center, facility use revenue, number of other sources. So concerned about that and prolonged closure of the campus, what that means down the road. As I mentioned, the state budget uncertainty and then the end of the hold harmless as we look out, that got extended a couple of years in this budget cycle, but we still have $2.9 million in our funding formula that's coming from that hold harmless guarantee. Next slide. So just the goals and strategies looking forward, still focused on trying to increase revenue, enrollment, FTS growth. That's becoming very difficult being online. There's a natural tendency that students are either taking a year off or not thrilled with just having online options. So we're pushing uphill on that one. The SCFF outcomes and then other income, trying, hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to fill up the new stadium and other facilities with outside users and generate some revenue and excitement on campus from that. And then long term, making sure that we align our expenses with revenue. Hopefully that revenue will be going up, but concerned that it could be going down. So trying to make sure that we tie our expenses with revenue in the future years. And then carving out some additional savings and budget flexibility so that we can make intentional investments in new programs, outreach, partnerships with industry and K-12, being intentional and putting resources towards increasing student completion and eliminating access and retention barriers, eliminating equity gaps, and increasing international students that hopefully will also generate some future revenue. And then continuing, past COVID and continuous what we're learning in distance education and continue with online and hybrid, particularly in all areas, but particularly in emeritus and adult ed where we haven't done that in the past. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Vice President Kachaturian.
Thank you, Corey. Good evening. This is the slide for Irvine Valley College's FTES trend in the last, since 2016-17. There's a gradual decline going from 10,496 to projected 9692 or target 9692 next year or 2021. What's not seen on this slide is the productivity. Part of the story that this chart tells us is how the college has been right-sizing and becoming more and more efficient. And just to give you some background on this, in 16-17, which is the first column, although we were at 10,000, almost 500 FTS, our productivity was in the mid 400s. And in 1920, I have a slide on this, we reached 510. So as the weekly student contact hours per full-time equivalent faculty improved over time, the college, the overall FTS declined. However, the college continued to operate in a more and more efficient manner and thereby generated savings. And as we went along through the period, the fiscal condition improved because back in 16-17 or 17-18, the college was experiencing similar fiscal challenges and deficits that Saddleback's been undergoing the last couple of years. And part of the solution options that Corey shared with the board, IVC has been looking at those and doing some of the same belt tightening or productivity and efficiency measures that our sister college has been undergoing as well. So we've gone through that process, and on the next slide, you'll see the result. In 16-17 and 17-18, our ending balances were alarmingly low. 1.2 million is pretty low, but as we started to implement those measures and also receiving some of the one-time funds over the course of the period of time here, our ending balance started to improve. Specifically, 18-19 went from 1.2 to 4.9. If you remember, 17-18 was the year when the SERP, early retirement program, was implemented, which contributed to the higher ending balance for that year or the following year as well. And 19-20 is when, as Kim and Corey mentioned, we had one-time sources added to the model. And also that's our last year. We did achieve some savings at the end of the year due to campus closure, utilities, travel, those kind of things. And 2021 on this chart is the budget, whereas the other 4 years are the actuals. And so the $7 million that we set aside for 2021 is our contingency reserve, which is subject to change depending on how the year goes and what kind of, the enrollment, specifically in the non-resident tuition or international programs, and also offset by savings that we're going to achieve. So we're going to be monitoring that on an ongoing basis and kind of keeping an eye on our ending balance for 2021. Next slide, please. Not to repeat my colleagues, the 2021 is the budget and 1920 is and the other 2 years are the actuals. If you look at the 2021, our total revenue is 74.7 million is our budget, and expenditures are budgeted at 77 million. However, traditionally in the other operating expenses line, which is the 6.3 million, we've had even before COVID savings, and that goes back to what Kim referenced earlier, which is the budgets don't necessarily get spent, but that's a traditional way of budgeting. So we will generate some savings, which would ultimately generate some savings in that column. At the same time, in 2021, we did budget our non-resident tuition at 92% of 1920 actuals, and about 75% of that comes from international students. So we did account for some projected decline. The actual decline may be a little higher. And again, we're going to be tracking that and updating our projections as we go. So there's that uncertainty. Just the only thing I want to mention on this chart is 1920, because we had one-time sources of funds allocated in that year, the college dedicated some of those funds for cap outlay purposes, and those are on the last 2 rows, cap outlay and other outgo, where we would be using those funds for one-time purposes, including small, cap outlay projects and purchase of equipment. And next slide. As far as our budget planning, we have a shared governance structure, which includes our budget development and resource planning committee. Around early spring, we start taking a deeper dive on our long-term revenue and expenditure projections with the goal of recommending a dollar amount for allocations in the future year. And for example, 2021 this fiscal year, we have added 2 faculty positions, Japanese and economics, and we're in the process of finalizing probably 2 to 3 classified positions, a couple in facilities related to, cleanliness and adding square footage as far as grounds and outreach/financial aid area. Long-term challenges, we have as Corey and Kim mentioned, we have the impact on COVID-19. I mentioned the international student program, and Hold Harmless, which is in place through 2024 for IVC. It's $2 million. So in 2021, so at the end of this period, we'll have to wait and see as to what happens to the Hold Harmless amount and where we are relative to that guaranteed amount. And that's a challenge long-term as well. Next slide. Some of the guiding principles and goals that we've had for many years now is our contingency reserve. We set it aside at 1 million or higher. And so we've been exceeding that in 1920 and 2021. We've set aside 7 million. Our productivity, as I mentioned, our goal for the last couple of years at least has been 500 wish for FTF or higher. 1920, we did reach 510, which is a great number. The 2021, we're encountering some challenges with softening enrollment. So we're probably going to take a little softer look or relax the rule in order to preserve programs and FTS, and given the COVID-19 impact. And one of the other principles we use is the ongoing revenues and expenditures. We look at those every year. And our goal is to continually align those. And it's a long-term goal, but also, annual review. In 1920 actuals, we've achieved the $1.5 million surplus. 2021, we're projecting a $2.5 million deficit. But again, that is the budget, how it's been budgeted. Depending on how much savings we achieve, that number will go down. And then we'll have to also look at the revenue side as well. And last but not least on this slide, I would like to just mention, similar to Saddleback, we do look at our vacant positions very carefully. Each position is reviewed at the PEC level, President's Executive Council, as well as departmental level, because that is close to 90% of our expenditures. So that is something that we take extremely seriously in order to make sure that those positions are where they need to be and needed for that year. And I think that's my last slide. I'll turn it over to Kim.
Thanks, David. All right, so for district services, this is our trend of ending balance, and similar to the colleges, we had a spike in 1920, and that was because of some one-time revenues we received, as well as some vacancy positions savings. And for 2021, we're estimating that the ending balance will go down because we have some planned expenditures for some of those one-time funds. So here's our detailed revenue and expense. You can see for 2021, our revenue is staying relatively flat compared to 1920. But on the expense side, we have $2.5 million more of expenses. If you look at the top expense line, academic salaries, it looks like we have a large increase for 2021, but we really had some savings in 1920 because of a vacancy. So we're just getting back in line with where we have been before. And also, we have the same experience on the other operating expenses. That's a large increase because we have funds allocated there, and I'll be going over a few of those on the next slide. So we have fully staffed all of our retirements from the SERP at district services, and we've allocated $565,000 for some one-time purposes. There's some HR training that they're going to be doing, some website upgrades and district rebranding, our IT data center emergency power off system. HR is going to also be updating the applicant tracking system, their job description review and updates, and also conversion to electronic files. So some overall district-wide budget trends is that the state COLA and growth have not been adequate to support our personnel increases over the past several years. This year in our budget, we have an average of 88.6% for personnel costs, and this is a decrease from last year where we actually spent 90.4%. Some of those areas include health and welfare costs, our STRS and PERS, salaries include negotiated increases, our step and column movement, as well as stipends and other additional payments. So for PERS and STRS, you can see we've budgeted the 16.15% for STRS and 20.7% for PERS this year. And those, again, were reduced because the state put some money towards those pension plans, and those will keep the rates for 21-22 also down from what they were projected. But going further out, STRS right now is expected to be at the maximum 18.1%. That's the maximum in statute. PERS, however, sets their rate every year, and we see those spiking even higher for those last 2 years. So through 2021, this is an additional $8.3 million this year than what we were paying in 15-16. So that's the money that we've budgeted to come from our pension stability trust to go back to the colleges. And this is a summary of that trust. We have total deposits in those prior years of almost 40 million. We've reimbursed the colleges over 20 million, and we've earned 4.5 million in interest so far. So our ending balance at June 30th of 20 was almost 24 million. In the next 3 years, we're projecting to put in another 18 million in and be spending almost 29 million in outgo back to reimbursements. So an estimated ending balance of 14.7 million. And we expect those annual costs to still creep up and be at least 12 million in those out years. So we'll have to fund that every year. This is a summary through year 3 of our early retirement incentive program. So we have 2 more years of payments. The 2021 and 21-22 will be the final payments for the CERP. And just to note that both colleges still have some vacant positions where they have not replaced the folks that left. And now Vice Chancellor Gable will give us our looking ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Kim, DeVete, and Corey. So looking ahead, we need to continue to monitor what's happening in the state economy. As we know, the COVID impact is still with us. However, a little bit of good news is the April through July tax collections came in about $1.3 billion higher than the state put into their 2021 budget. So that's about a 5% increase. As we know, the state budget the revenue is primarily driven by taxes. So 56% of that comes from our personal income taxes, 15% comes from sales tax, and then another 12% comes from corporate tax. So I think it's really going to be telling when we see the governor's budget in January how the rest of this year plays out for us with everything still being closed. So it's a little too soon to tell on that side. Another good trend that we're seeing is that the unemployment is coming down, although it's still significantly higher than it was a year ago. So last year in August of 2019, it was 3.9%. In June of this year, so June of 2020, it was at 14.9, and then now as of August, it's at 11.4. So hopefully we'll continue to see that downward trend, which would then lead to more personal income taxes and likely more sales taxes as more and more folks get out there working and opening up shopping. I think the other thing that, as far as the state economy goes, there is the split roll initiative that's going to be on the November ballot. If that passes, that will provide our district with about $2.6 million annually, because we would be guaranteed $100 per FTES, just like we are with the Education Protection Account, the EPA funds. So the passage of that proposition would provide us with ongoing income that we normally would not see. As far as property taxes go, those are remaining strong. Nationally, as of July, there was about a 7.5% increase. And Orange County is on the rise somewhat as well. What we are seeing is a little bit of a downturn in the number of single-family construction starts, although they are expecting that to start to increase in 21-23. So time will tell on that. But we're not anticipating a very good budget coming from the governor in January. And it's more than likely, probably, that we're not going to see a whole lot of funding coming from the federal government for additional CARES money. And as we all know, there was a significant amount of money budgeted in the state budget, assuming that we would get that CARES Act money. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in January. We are continuing to pursue tenants for ATEP, although that has slowed down somewhat as well due to the pandemic. And the long-term impacts of the COVID-19, the campuses mentioned that, and we'll see a presentation on that later tonight as well. We're in the final stages of hiring a firm to help us with our technology master plan. Interviews were held last week, and we'll have a recommendation coming forward to the Board of Trustees to award a contract at the October meeting. But that'll be the final piece of all of our plans. So we've adopted our education and strategic master plan. We've adopted our facilities master plan. So now we just need the technology plan to come along. And then, as both the campuses mentioned, we are monitoring our FTES. Unfortunately, as of today, we're down about 5% from where we were last fall. I will say that we are down much lower than many other districts. I know one of our adjacent districts is down about 18%. So I feel pretty fortunate that we're only down 5%, if you want to look at it that way. So with that, I will open it up to questions. If the board has any questions.
So Trustee Jamal.
Go ahead, if Dave raised his hand.
No, go ahead. Tim should go first.
All right. So I'll start with just the last slide because that's what I remember most. Anne-Marie, you mentioned there's going to be a technology master plan. Now, is that going to include an audit of what we're currently doing? Is that the purpose of this, and to make recommendations for our technology needs going forward?
The purpose of the technology master plan is really to look at what we have to determine what a refresh cycle would be, but then also after looking at the education and strategic master plans and the goals and objectives, what we need to do from a technology standpoint in order to help the colleges meet those goals and objectives that have been identified within their education and strategic master plans. So that should be somewhat of a visionary document that lays out where we want to go with technology and what we need in technology, as well as identifying how much we need to allocate towards technology on an annual basis, similar to what we did with the facilities master plan, where we laid out the cash flow over a 20-year period.
So it is going to do an audit of what we're currently doing.
Probably not a full audit, but yes, it has to be based on what's already here in order to plan for the future.
And I can, let Dr. Bramucci, let me make him a panelist real quickly, and he can add to that as well, since he's the one that is leading and responsible for the technology master plan. Dr. Bramucci, you should be available.
He's in here.
I can answer it here, so what's the question?
The technology master plan. Will it contain an audit of what we already have?
It's not a full audit, but it contains a gap analysis between where we're at across all the major areas. Another thing to notice is that we are actually partnering with the Foundation for the California Community Colleges because they would like to use this as a model up and down the state. So we have a representative on those committee deliberations.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. I had a couple more questions, TJ. So, Anne-Marie, what happens? I think I know the answer, but what happens when the hold harmless is sunset?
So when the hold harmless sunsets, we will need to make a decision on whether or not we're going to continue to follow the SCFF model, or if we will fund the districts basically at the level that they were at the previous year, plus any COLA or growth. Yeah, the colleges, sorry, not the district. Plus any COLA or growth that is within the state budget. So as Kim explained, the first piece that we calculate is how much revenue we are generating based on SCFF. And that is really our starting point to the budget. And in accordance with our board policy, that is the operating budgets for the colleges. So that will be something that we would look at, you know, with the way the trends are on the revenues not being sufficient to cover our increases in personnel costs. I would say I will more than likely come to the board with a recommendation to continue to fund that hold harmless amount locally with our basic aid dollars, but we'll see what happens when we get to 23-24.
Okay, and TJ, thanks for that, Anne-Marie. One final question from me is, I think Corey mentioned several times that Saddleback College is going to align future expenses with revenue. I mean, is that something that's going to be going on at the district and at IVC as well?
Yes. Yes, that's all part of looking at that. And that is something that we are all working towards.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Trustee Lang.
Just a couple of observations, and some of these are really along the lines of what Trustee Jamal, I think, has already observed and commented on. But on page 5 of 40 of Exhibit A, you've got the changes from the tentative budget with all kinds of nice footnotes. But I would suggest that in the future, you may be accompany those footnotes with some dollar figures that show exactly what those changes are or what the dollar amount of those changes are, as explained verbally in the footnotes. That would have helped me a little bit, at least. And then I think on page 11, I guess I just want to highlight a little bit from my perspective of what I think is going on here. And that is that we've got 4.9 million in hold harmless funds as our total, along with basic aid, along with COLA and growth. And it seems to me that all three of those figures are really coming out of basic aid funds, or
correct,
a total of over $9.6 million.
Correct.
So I guess one comment that I'll make is I don't understand how we can continue to pay increased salaries and growth if we're not getting reimbursed for that from the state. I don't expect you to necessarily comment on that, but I'm just making that observation myself. And then secondly, you're basically saying you'd continue to commit basic aid money for hold harmless. But again, I think we have to remember that to the extent that we're using all of this basic aid money to backfill the colleges, those funds aren't available to make needed capital improvements on all of our additional education site, or all of our education sites. And that disturbs me. Let me just see if there was anything else that I wanted to point out. Yeah, I just, I obviously I applaud the efforts that have been made on both campuses to try and right size their budgets, with the available dollars under the SCFF model. But it seems to me there's a lot more of that needs to be done. Reading through the, I guess the lines here, I think what I'm hearing you say, Vice Chancellor, is that we can't really rely on positive state budgets going forward. In fact, in this latest budget, all they've really done is kick the can down the road from what looked to be a pretty doomsday type budget that was initially advocated by Governor Newsom. So that also concerns me a great deal. And that's the extent of my comments.
Okay. Trustee Riddell.
Yes, we were talking about doing not a full audit, but why don't we do a full audit?
Of technology?
Yes, we could start there. Because if we have this problem that we're looking ahead and that we're always taking from basic aid, maybe we need to review what we are doing and maybe cut some spending. I'm not sure. That's why I'm saying, why don't we just do a full audit?
I think And I don't know if David or Corey, if you guys, because you guys will both be involved in the technology master plan as well, if you have any comments on it, but I will again promote Dr. Bramucci to a panelist. But Corey and David, do you have any comments on the technology aspect of it?
I can make a few comments, certainly not my area of expertise, but certainly from a budget standpoint, I have a certain interest in making sure that we are using that resource as efficiently as we can across the district. Certainly there is a shift in needs for technology. Certainly as we see the distance learning model, we've seen a lot of increases in licenses and software licenses and a variety of other things to create learning opportunities for students. So the extent to where we land post-COVID in terms of the mix between technology and facilities is something that I think we're going to be talking about probably annually for the next several years in terms of the mix of basic aid dollars that are going towards technology versus facilities. So I think this, a pandemic kind of changes your priorities a little bit and how you allocate resources. So we'll have, bottom line for me though, is to making sure wherever we spend our money, we're doing it as efficiently as we can.
Well, with that comment, I see, Corey, that it's a good time to do an audit. Yeah.
David, did you have anything to add?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. I see an opportunity. The audit could become one of the goals and objectives of the master plan, because it's going to be a technology strategic master plan, and it'll be related to our strategic plan and educational plan and facilities plan. So within the strategic plan for technology for the next 5 to 10 years, if we can't achieve it in this process with the consultant we're going to be hiring, it could be a goal. If it's a long-term, bigger undertaking, we could put it in the plan to accomplish the audits. And also part of the technological, the world is inherently supposed to lead to efficiencies, and that's something I'm looking forward to. Looking at not only the technology as far as auditing goes, but also the underlying processes. Where can we use technology to achieve additional efficiencies and savings? I would just add that.
Dr. Bramucci, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's not just the cost of technology. It's impossible to forecast too far out in advance, 10 years in advance. But what you can do is to isolate trends that are occurring. Some of those trends are happening. Things are moving to the cloud. So we're seeing a transition from operational or from capital spending to operational spending, and that affects our funding. A second large delta is in security. We've made major investments in security, but that arms race continues to heat up. A third one is the long-term plans for our ERP, our enterprise resource planning. We have 2 of the 3 pieces, the HCM, human capital management, and finance, are in Workday. Workday is building Workday Student, a potential replacement for the student information system that we have custom created. But it's a very large task, and it's taking them a long time to do it. They are coming along with it quite well. We've been in regular meetings with the colleges, and we're starting to formulate a transition plan, depending on the consensus that we find out at the colleges. But as those products get more mature, that's a third possible trick. So the technology plan can't tell you what's going to be big 5 years from now, but it can identify major trends that we need to be in line with.
Let's see. Seeing no more hands.
Looks like Trustee Lang put his hand up again.
Oh, okay.
Just a quick comment, and I'm sure that Trustee Witt probably knows this already, but we I just want to make sure that we're using proper nomenclature here. The district does do an audit each and every year, and as you know, there are certain members of the board that serve on that audit committee, including myself. I think what you're probably asking for is to maybe take a deeper dive in certain selective areas. We do have a person that is an internal auditor of the district, and that's possibly something that individual could help other members of the administration team and provide information to the Board of Trustees about, potential other areas that we ought to be looking at to save money, et cetera.
Thank you, David. That's exactly right.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, we'll go ahead. I think this is where we want to advance 6.1.
I think we need to do the Associated Students budget presentation because they're in 6.2. So you want to have a presentation before you vote.
So hi, everyone. My name is Adam Brownell, and I'm the ASG president.
Hello, my name is Nicholas, and I am the ASG Director of Budget and Finance.
So first and foremost, I want to thank you for giving us opportunity to present to you our 2020-2021 Saddleback ASG adopted budget. Before we provide an overview of our adopted budget, I'd like to pass it over to Nick for a look into last year's records. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Sorry, could you go back? Thank you. That's all right. Before we get into our adopted budget for this upcoming year, we would like to have a brief overview of last year's records. You'll notice on the top left our adopted and revised budgets that no adjustments were made, meaning that our beginning balance did not change throughout the year. The category Other Revenues comprises of movie ticket sales and other related events. Bookstore contracts, as you see, are the same because of renegotiating contracts. Vending was reduced to about $10,000. A reason why is not only because of the closing of campus, but our food service provider vacated the spot at the end of spring break. So either way, we would still have had a loss of $10,000. More information regarding vending services will be covered throughout the rest of the presentation. Stamp sales performed well with a great increase in revenue than what we have projected before. So we're happy to report that we will continue using our stamp sales to help support our programs, scholarships, and student services. Taking a look at our uses of funds, you'll notice that each category had huge decreases. For example, in campus life, $60,000 was put for a new campus stage as part of the Campus Beautification Committee. Obviously, because of the pandemic, the priority of this stage is low, so we had to put that on pause, but that is where a huge chunk of our funding went into. As well, with student services, $60,000 was put into the OCTA bus pass program. It was not implemented last year because of campus closing, so there was a rollover. However, we're happy to report that the program began only a few weeks ago, and we will cover more in detail about that throughout the presentation. We're still prioritizing categories such as scholarships for its importance to students and the future as well. With that being said, I'd like to highlight budget highlights week overview. Next slide, please.
Perfect. So we're anticipating $361,010 in our beginning balance for this next fiscal year. We're also happy to report that even though we're in a pandemic, we're projecting $150,000 in stamp sales. For contracted revenue services, which comprises the bookstore and food services, ASG gets 40.72% of the $550,000 contract, leaving us with $223,960. Additionally, we received the same percentage from vending services, leaving us with $1,955. I'd be remiss not to mention we're not entirely sure how vending services will look for the spring semester. However, we remain optimistic. Unlike previous records, dining services have been left out due to the closing of campus, and negotiations with service providers for food services on campus will be made later in the year. So for now, we'll be leaving this out of the table. This year, we're donating approximately 20% of our total source of funds to scholarships. Additionally, 8% is taken out of emergency reserves to compensate for scholarship benefits. With that being said, we may need to adjust our budget for next year depending on the effects quarantine has on our bookstore contracts. So now I'd like to turn it back over to Nick for a look into our adopted budget.
Thank you. So if you look to the left, you will see our records from our adoptive and tentative budgets from 2019 to 2020. Our committee held a very conservative mindset with last year's budget, so you'll notice a greater rollover for our beginning balance of this year. The bookstore contract has stayed the same as well as stamp sales. Looking at uses of funds, you see that we reduced down a lot of division spending as well as AHG spending in other categories. Because of our rollover, we're happy to say that there will be an increased amount of investment to campus life, co-curricular programs, as well as student sport programs. AHG operations increased because we're investing more funds towards postal services due to the pandemic. We're looking to mailing stamp booklets as well as other giveaway items to students in need. Personnel had a small decrease because of the closing of campus. We're unsure whether or not campus will reopen next year, so we only decided to take off a little. Like from the previous slide, scholarships have received more funding and our emergency reserves increased as well. With that being said, this is our budget as it stands, but we would really like to highlight our goals and ambitions for next year. Next slide, please.
Perfect. So there's 3 categories where we want to focus our efforts. These being civic engagement and advocacy, assisting students with non-academic barriers, and thoroughly building community on campus. So we're still going to be advocating for students on a campus, district, and statewide level. We're still involved with the Student Senate for Community Colleges. We're also still attending district meetings and being a part of the governance process. We're working on voter engagement events for students. We've recently partnered with National Voter Education Week, which is a nonpartisan organization intended to simplify the voting process. We're also part of the Ballot Bowl for California, where students can register to vote through a special saddleback link, and we can accumulate points for a statewide friendly competition. And lastly, we're also working with the League of Women Voters to do a Know Your Ballot initiative. In regards to sustainability, we're still working on sustainable efforts, even virtually. We're looking to put in additional refillable water stations on campus in preparation for our return. Moreover, in partnership with OCTA, we're happy to say that even though we're in a pandemic and students aren't coming to campus, we've come a step closer to helping students with their basic transportation needs. So we're thrilled to announce we launched and we have the first year funded through a grant program. We also increased our allocation for scholarships. We discussed with members of the Promise program and were recommended to put money towards general students and scholarships. And we're working with our health services to facilitate events for students. Regarding community building, we're going to implement fresh ideas this year. We know that departments are still learning about different ways to engage with students in this new virtual space. So we've increased our special topics fund so departments can come to us if they think of a creative way of engaging students. We're also focusing extensively on hosting virtual events, from our upcoming Club Rush to our upcoming campus-wide leadership workshops. We're hoping we can retain our sense of community. So again, I want to thank everyone for giving us this time to present our ASG budget. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Trustee Lang.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank both Mr. Brownell and Lucas for your presentations tonight. Good job, guys. A couple of observations that I have in looking over the Saddleback budget, and hopefully the IVC folks are paying attention because I'm going to have very similar question for them too. It occurs to me that using the 2019-20 adopted budget rather than the 2019 actual numbers in comparing against your adopted budget for 2021 would be more useful and insightful in my view. Part of the problem is particularly as I look over the expense categories, a lot of the numbers appear to be based upon that adopted final budget for last year. And as you look through those numbers, they are significantly different from the actual amounts where ASG ended for the year. So that gives me cause for some concern. I think you've probably done a reasonable job of trying to identify what your sources of revenue are going to be for the year. I am curious, though I did see obviously that you're anticipating a fairly significant drop off in stamp sales, which doesn't surprise me at all, because I would have guessed that the stamp sales occur fairly early in the fiscal year, and last year or in the prior year, it wouldn't have been affected by that much by the pandemic situation. Although I would think that would have an effect for this year. And so that, obviously you'll know better probably fairly early in the fiscal year as to how your estimate is looking and what you need to do to adjust things as far as that goes. Those are probably my chief observations regarding the budget.
Trustee Jamal.
Sorry. Great job, guys. Well done. 2 questions. One on the refillable water bottle stations. I don't know if I caught all of that. How are you going about doing that again?
So,
sorry, go ahead, Adam.
The problem with Zoom, right? Okay, so yeah, we've actually had this. We've had this in mind for a while. This is like we're carrying on and echoing what our past ASG intended to do. So we're still we allocated. I think we allocated quite. I don't know the exact numbers, but we allocated enough to keep pursuing like sustainable campus initiatives, things like that. So is that kind of the answer?
Oh, no, that's great. No, I guess I should have. I remember this coming up in past ASGs. I would suggest you, if you haven't already, reached out to the Moulton Niguel Water District. And they might be helpful with you. They're the retail district that provides water to our campus. And they may be a good partner for you in this effort. So you may want to talk to them or have someone in our administration, or I know people over there. I'd be happy to connect you to them. They might be very helpful. And then the second question, go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that the board may recall that we are currently working on all of our architectural design standards, and we are putting in as one of our standards to have the refillable water station. So all new projects and all renovations that we do, we are converting the water fountains to refillable bottle stations.
Oh, okay. Great. And then the second thing was, I guess I don't know the answer to this. I think the scholarship distribution, dissemination you're doing is awesome. Are those funds just going to the foundation and then they're providing the scholarship, or are you guys actually administering the scholarships and reviewing scholarship candidate credentials?
My understanding is that they're going to the foundation.
Okay.
I haven't heard about anything as far as us or ASG reviewing them, but I might be out of the loop. Maybe Nick, do you maybe know?
It's generally given to the foundation.
Okay.
I wouldn't think we would administrate that.
Yeah, I thought so. That's it. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Milchker.
So I appreciated your comments very much. And I don't know if Adam Brunell, if you heard me mention your name in my 2-minute board report, because when I listened to President Stern's President Circle's event, you're the last one that spoke, and you talked about how Saddleback College turned you around and really changed your life. And it was a beautiful speech. It was like fabulous. And I think that you have speaking in your future for sure. You did a wonderful job. But anyway, I just had to mention that. But anyway, I agree with what you're doing to make sure that the students are have community building in the future when we're face to face, and now even virtually. I think that's a great idea. In President Stern's event, some of the people that came spoke about how they were over 1,300 students came for mental health visits to Saddleback College through our health service, and how our students are in trouble in a way because they're isolated and they're by themselves, and many people are having emotional problems because of this. So, anything you can do to build community virtually, I think, is fabulous. So I really agree with that. I also wanted to say, when you mentioned refillable water bottles, I remember there was a wonderful student trustee named Lucy Hendricks, who was she was president of the student body. She was ASG president from 2016-17, and it was her idea to have refillable water bottles on Saddleback College campus. And she and her student government put all the refillable water bottles that are on the campus now on there. And I think that's a great thing to continue. And I think last year's ASG, they worked very hard on getting bus passes for all the students. So ASG makes a big difference for our students. So I really want to thank you for that. Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any further questions. So next we'll hear from IVC.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to speak on behalf of our budget for this fiscal year. With me today, I have Tristan Vu, my Executive Vice President, and also Brandon Lang, our Vice President of Budget and Finance. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I will hand it off to Brandon to talk about the fiscal year of 2019 to 2020 as far as our actuals.
Thank you, Brianna. For our fiscal year 2019-2020 actuals, there were a few variances within both our revenue and our use of funds. First and foremost, ASIVC sticker sales netted $4,833 more than the projected $148,000. Secondly, we netted an additional $1,000 more than the projected on bookstore commissions. This is due to a clause within our contract with the bookstore that states that if a book is not readily available when someone is ordering it, an additional $1,000 will be paid to ASIVC. In terms of our cafeteria commissions, our revenues decreased by $47,630 from $90,000 to $42,370 due to both COVID-19 as well as the fact that our cafeteria is no longer contracted at the moment. Furthermore, we saw an additional $1,945 from our other categories, which include the interest the district allocates to us from the local agency investment fund, as well as Regal movie ticket sales. With all these factors considered, our total revenue for the 2019-2020 fiscal year was $938,113, which is $39,852 less than expected. I will now move on to our use of funds for the 2019-2020 actuals. Due to COVID-19, we saw a decrease in the use of funds from several categories. The first of these is in the category of additional club support. Here we saw a decrease of $4,802 in funds used from the anticipated $14,300 to $4,802. The second of these is in the category of ASG of IVC, where we saw a decrease of $61,534 in funds used from the anticipated $99,214 to $37,680. Furthermore, we saw a decrease of $31,919 in funds used for co-curricular program support from the anticipated $100,800 to $68,881. We transferred our $73,797 contingency fund for commencement during preparations that occurred long before May in anticipation of the expected cost. This was before our campus was closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, our use of funds for department supports decreased by $155,863 from the anticipated $282,700 to $126,873 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Specific departments include but are limited to kinesiology and athletics. Lastly, we saw a decrease in our use of funds for student life due to the COVID-19 pandemic from the anticipated $282,700 to $126,837. This was a difference of $155,863. With all these factors considered, our total use of funds was $460,581 less than expected from the anticipated $977,965 to $517,384. Our ending balance for the 2019-2020 fiscal year was $420,729.
All right, thank you, Brandon. And now I'm going to just share some of our budget highlights for our new fiscal year, the year 2020 to 2021. So we have budgeted for this year $1,729,000, and the simple breakdown of that is because we had our beginning balance of $420,000 and $729, and we have projected $100,000 and $10,000 for our ASIVC access sales. And as far as our contracted bookstore commissions, that goes to $450,000. And we also have $20,000 contracted in cafeteria commissions. On to the next slide, please. Okay, so if we start with our beginning balance, we did have an increase from our tentative to adopted budget by about $20,000. And when we go to ASIVC access sales, there's actually a decrease from tentative to adopted by $30,000. And that would be expected because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can see some decrease in enrollment, and also some students will not be purchasing it for obvious reasons. They feel that they just won't be purchasing it this year, but we're doing our best to kind of show them that we have a lot to offer them, especially when we get into how our budget breaks down to their benefit. Onto the bookstore commission, there is no change between the tentative budget and our adopted budget of this year. And just to highlight one thing about that, there is a 50% split with ASIVC and instructional co-curriculars. And so that kind of explains that. Onto cafeteria commissions, we can again see no change from our tentative to adopted budget, although there is a decrease from the prior year because of our contract shifting and various things we have to consider as we move forward into the spring semester with consideration to the pandemic. So that brings us to about our total source of funds went from $1,010,000 to about $1,729,000. So now onto the use of funds. So starting with the bookstore AR reversal, this is actually not included in our new budget. This is just something from the old budget, and there's different ways that that revenue is being used instead. So that's just not a part of what we are using our spending for this year. So for the instructional department, you can see that there is no change between our tentative and adopted. And for student services and scholarships, there is also no change between our tentative that we presented in the spring and the adopted that we are presenting now this year. For club programs and support, again, no change. We expect to spend roughly the same amount that we have put in our tentative budget and on from what we have adopted in our in this fall. And for ASIVC events and programs, we also see no change. So same story kind of along those lines. Now for student life non-discretionary, there was an increase by about $435. That's because the student life non-discretionary makes up our staff position, and there is salary and benefits included in that. And within that, there is also the $90,000 that we set aside to pay for our share in the OCTA bus passes for our students. So that's kind of what is compiled in there. Onto the contingency fund slash mid-year request, we see a decrease from the tentative to adopted by just about $10,000, which brings us to our overall use of funds, which is a decrease from our tentative to adopted, and that is also reflected in our source of funding. So that will be all for this slide. And now I will pass it on to Tristan, my Executive Vice President.
Hi, everyone. I will be presenting ASIVC's goals for the years 2021. Of course, our goals as the associate students of IBC is largely centered around student engagement, which of course has changed drastically with our transition from an in-person experience to an online classes, and in order to maintain this lost sense of community within our school, we are looking to enhance and continue some of the events that we've tested in the fall, namely our engagement fair and our club day, which saw large amounts of participation with the student body and the development of many of that sense of community that seems to have been lost with this transition. Beyond these specific events, we're looking to maintain a robust online presence through our social media and through other online platforms where students can feel that they are heard from from our ASIBC, and also where they can ask questions and engage with the administration and get timely feedback. As well, with IBC's compliance with AB 963, we're looking to expand from the subject of civic engagement outside of the sanctioned events that we're working on with the administration. ASIBC specifically wants to increase student involvement in participatory and shared governments, demonstrate tangible student activism and community leadership, which we believe will serve to bolster the stated goals of AB 963 and what IBC itself is trying to accomplish with their own civic engagements events. As well, with our declining sales in ASIBC Access, we're looking to increase some of the incentives in order to alleviate that decline in sales that may have been caused by students who feel that purchasing ASIBC Access, which is generally oriented around enhanced experience in our in-person events, which they may not feel is worth it on an online. And that translates into things like our scholarships, which are accessible only to students who have purchased ASIBC Access, and other tangible student engagement opportunities like perhaps certificate programs that demonstrate learned student leadership. We believe that these aspects of student leadership and engagement differ from the engagement opportunities that we provide to all students, in the sense that they provide tangible, concrete examples of student leadership that we can provide due to their direct sponsorship of ASIBC. Thank you.
All right, and then as you can see, this is just sort of a breakdown for our annual budget allocation if you want to look in detail. And then you can go on to the next one, which is just a continuation of that. And that's pretty much what the rest of these pages are, just for your insight to look at the actual breakdowns within each category. With that, we're open for questions now, if there are any.
Looks like Trustee Lang.
Yes, thank you. So just really same comment as I made on the Saddleback presentation regarding consideration in the future of comparing actual fiscal year 2019-2020 numbers with the current year budgeted numbers. I think that would have been a little more helpful, although I want to give credit to the IVC folks in their budget who appeared to rely a lot less on beginning balances and really more thought to specifically how they wanted to allocate funds. There were a couple of things, though, in the detail that stood out to me. One was you've eliminated the president's contingency fund. So I'm guessing you adopted this before the president actually started his tenure. No comment necessary on that. Secondly, I noticed that on co-curricular, you just provided one lump sum to the Office of Instruction for Distribution, rather than try and break this down into all of the different subcategories that they had in the adopted budget, and wanted to know if there's been some change in philosophy there.
Yeah, so the reason that we did that is because we really wanted to give more independence and also more streamlined processes to both our club programs for ICC and also the co-curriculars. So as you know, in the past, our club and co-curricular program used to be I4C, and with the change of our new structure, we just split them because we're actually seeing a large growth of our co-curricular programs, and we wanted to grant them their independence to use those funds. So when instead of allocating a certain amount for each of the co-curricular programs and the club programs, we just decided to do a 50-50 split between the co-curriculars and the club programs. And on the exchange for that, it also gives us the ability to have more streamlined funding request process for our club programs. We have about almost 30 clubs that are active for this fall, and we wanted to really make sure that they can maintain their robust composure even in the pandemic. So as we developed our budget from last year, that's kind of where we got the split from.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And by the way, good job to the entire IVC ASG team for your hard work on the budget.
Thank you.
Trustee Jamal.
Excuse me. No, I don't have any additional questions in particular. I just want to say that, you know, in my day job, I sit through a lot of presentations, including budget presentations by people who are paid professionals. And I think, Brianna, your team and the Saddleback team, you guys did an excellent job. I'm really appreciative of the thought that's gone into this and your presentation skills. And comparatively speaking to people who get paid to do this on a day-to-day basis, you did very well. So thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated. I pride myself and my other colleagues in their leadership as well. I think they have done a spectacular job in their roles so far.
I like how you're calling your officers your executive VPs and your budget and finance director. So I like the fact that you were doing that.
Oh, thank you. I really can't do what I do without them. And I think that's where that sort of sentimental part kicks in.
Very good.
Great.
Okay, student trustee Manafi.
All right. I want to thank Brianna, Tristan, and Brandon. First of all, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. My only question was, I believe most of the club's meetings and ASIVC events are being held online. So why are we increasing the funding for clubs and ASIVC events?
Well, okay, so part of the reason that we decided to increase the budget for that is, well, in the spring, we couldn't anticipate exactly what the fall semester would look like. So we knew that we wanted our clubs to get extra support. And at the same time, like I mentioned, we really changed the way that clubs can request for their funds. And so this is something that will kind of, you know, progress throughout more of the upcoming semesters and club events and stuff like that. But there are a few conferences and webinars that students must pay for to attend. And so we didn't want to just decrease the budget knowing that there's never going to be anything in person this fall and possibly in the spring. So we really couldn't expect whether we're going to be on campus or not. So that's kind of where that consideration came from.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more requests to speak.
I think Bobby's hand is up.
Trustee Jay.
I just wanted to thank them for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. It was excellent. And we're so lucky to have such good students and such wonderful people to do this. It was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Jay.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I think you are now finished.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Do you think you may want to consider a short break here before we roll into the next presentation?
Well, I think what we're going to do is 6.1, 6.2, to a vote to extend the meeting with a break. So with that, looking at 6.1.
So, oh, is it a hearing?
It's a public hearing, so I have a little script here. We are now on board agenda item 6.1, approval of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. Before we have that public hearing, Vice Chancellor Anne-Marie Gable will provide an introduction.
Yes, I will. The agenda item pertains to a public hearing for the approval of the South Orange County Community College District proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. Public notices have invited all interested persons to attend this public hearing and express opinions about the South Orange County Community College District proposed budget for 2020-2021.
All right. Does the board have any questions to staff to assist with their understanding of this matter? No hands raised in the participant list. Board item 6.1, public hearing on the matter at hand is now open. Gavel. Comments are not to exceed 5 minutes. Do I have any public comment?
There are no public comments.
We have no public comments.
Okay, Vice Chancellor Anne-Marie Gable, does the staff have any responses to the public comments that we didn't have? So that's probably a no. This public hearing is now closed. Is there any further discussion on this matter by the board? No hands raised. 6.1 is concluded. Item 6.1, approval of the proposed budget for fiscal 2021. Need a motion and a second.
I'll move it.
I second it.
I have a motion from Trustee Jamal, second from Trustee Jay. Any request to speak? We'll go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Yes. Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Whitwright-Dell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monafi.
Aye.
Okay. Now we'll move on to 6.2, which is the adopted budget for fiscal year 2021.
You just did it.
That was.
You did it.
Oh,
Did it.
well, that's not what the script said. So I'm just reading what I read. Okay. So then at this point, I will entertain a motion in a second for extending the meeting with a break.
I so moved.
I guess that was Trustee Rydell moving, Trustee Jamal seconding. What is your motion, Trustee Rydell?
That we extend our meeting to 9:30, 9:45.
Got to pick one.
Okay, to 9:45.
With a break?
Yes, with a 10 minutes.
Okay. So Trustee Jamal, are you okay with that motion?
Yes, second.
Okay. We'll go ahead and vote on the meeting extension.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Whitwright-Dell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monafi.
Aye.
All right. So I have 8:46 at the moment. So we'll be back at 8:56. So we'll go ahead and resume with 4.3 presentation.
I think you mean 6.3.
No, 4.3.
4.3, really?
4.3.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I wish I was Jim or Dave, trust me.
So this evening, we would like to talk to the board about planning for the spring semester. The schedules are very close to being released, at least for students to look at them, and they'll be starting to enroll in October.
So we will need to be making a decision about what the spring 2021 will look like. So if we can go to the next slide, and this is a presentation by myself and the two college presidents. Again, our guiding principles are always the health and safety, first of our students and employees, then of our students and employees' direct contact and the community. Continuity of learning with integrity, which means we rely on the faculty to let us know whether or not they're able to meet the course objectives and learning outcomes by continuing with remote learning, or if they need some portion of face-to-face work. Considering equity, because of course we know that COVID-19 does not equally affect all portions of the community in quite the same way. So we want to use our equity lens as well. And then finally, to support our regional economy and workforce. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you know, because you all follow the news, that the reopenings of various universities and colleges have been in the news, that there have been these massive outbreaks of COVID-19, particularly at residential universities. And Dr. Fauci came out recently suggesting that they actually, where they have residences, where they have dorms, that they actually keep the students on campus rather than sending them back home and then taking the chance of spreading the disease within the communities that the students would be far-reaching going out to isolate them. And then if they make the decision to go remotely, once they're well, then make the decision to go ahead and send them home. So this is the environment in which we're trying to make a decision. About a week ago, 10 days ago, the CSUs, California State Universities, announced that they will be continuing with remote instruction through at least the spring semester. The University of California is actually thinking about making an announcement that they will be remote through the fall of 2021, that they're now thinking they won't be back until fall. And some of the community colleges, we checked, and Trustee Milchiker was there at the Orange County Legislative Task Force, and all of the other 3 districts in Orange County, community college districts in Orange County, have decided that they are definitely staying remote, largely remote, through the spring 2021 semester. So before we post the schedule this week for students to begin to look at it, we wanted to come to you with this discussion. So moving on to the next slide, and Dr. Stern will take this next part.
Thank you, Chancellor Burke. Good evening, trustees. When we last talked about COVID, we talked about 4 data bits that we were using to look at where the disease was going, and 2 of those were more forward-thinking. The 2 that were more forward-thinking are the data bits that are now being used by the state in their own tier system, and that's the new case rate per 100,000 population each day and the positive test rate. And the state has a pretty simple tiering system that shows the risk level for each of these 2 data bits, and with that, some guidance that comes out that shows you, for instance, what percentage of restaurant capacity can open, what percentage of movie theaters, gyms, etc. Next slide. We've moved in the last few weeks from the purple tier, the worst tier, to the second tier. That's the red tier. And even since we produced this PowerPoint presentation, the data has improved a little bit. The current new case rate per day per 100,000 is 4.2, coming down from 5, and the positive test rate is 3.9, which puts us in the red tier. Next slide. And you can see that the red tier, for the red tier, that positivity rate of 3.9%, you would think that would put us in the orange tier. But the way this works is it's the least favorable of the 2 pieces of data that counts. So we're still in the red tier, but we're certainly headed for the orange tier. Now, what the state came out with this time is very specific for all sorts of businesses. And what I'm showing you right now is the specific guidance that the state is offering for colleges, for higher ed, with regard to on-ground lecture and on-ground lab and studio classes. I want to emphasize that this guidance, these rules that the state has set up by tiers, are a political decision that wisely balances safety and health with the economic concerns about the devastation that the epidemic has wreaked on businesses. If we want to look at safety primarily and not necessarily supporting the economy, we might want to be a little bit more cautious than these guardrails would allow us to do. And indeed, I would point out that these are guardrails, and we typically don't want to drive our cars 65 miles an hour against the guardrail. We want to stay within the guardrail with a little bit of a buffer. So right now in the red tier where we sit, we could bring back lectures at 25% of full capacity. We have no intention of doing that. We can't really bring back classes 25% full, and we're accomplishing learning outcomes for students with lecture remotely. It's really labs and studios that we brought back. There you can see we're now allowed to bring them back at full capacity. Even then, we've reduced most of the labs that we do have coming back to half capacity in most cases. In the next category, you could see we could bring back even more lecture classes, increase the capacity. Again, we do not intend to do that this semester. Next slide. In addition to showing the lab and lecture capacity that we're allowed under each tier, the state has provided some guidance for student activities, and you can see that all student activities in all tiers are still virtual if possible. And that's the guidance that we're using. We're trying to do all of those things virtual if possible to do them. I've also included in this chart the office work guidance. Now, this isn't for college specific, this is for non-essential offices. So if you or a spouse works in an office, this is the guidance that the state is offering based on the tier. We already have essential workers back in the office in some areas at both colleges because ours is an essential business. But for non-essentials, they're really not even supposed to consider bringing back people into the office until the orange tier. And even then, please note, with significant modifications, telework is still recommended as long as we're in this crisis in the tiering system. Next slide, and I'll pass it to Dr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Dr. Stern. As you all recall, the fall plan that was presented and that was discussed with the board ensured the highest standard for student and employee health and safety. And I want to reiterate in the slide that that continues to be the guiding principle for our spring semester planning. As Dr. Stern mentioned, we do have on a limited basis some reintegration of our workforce throughout our district, as well as some on-campus student learning. So we have essential employees, we have employees who are performing essential functions at our colleges. And these employees, to prepare for the safety of that, our district released the return to work guidelines that in essence provides an overview of the necessary protocols as well as the practices needed to maintain safety, social distancing, and so forth. As a prerequisite for employees returning to work on our campuses, they agreed to abide by these guidelines and by the safety practices. For example, they agreed to conduct daily wellness checks before reporting to work. It should be noted that these practices will continue to be modified as we evolve. Our district has also made available on the Workday platform several two required for staff and manager training videos and 2 recommended videos. The required training videos are coronavirus awareness and cleaning and disinfecting your workplace. And again, this is a way for us to maintain safety practices. As Dr. Stern has alluded, Saddleback College this semester has, I believe, something like 33 sections, predominantly in health sciences and CTE with some hands-on learning. And so they have implemented guidelines and protocols for students. For example, to maintain physical distancing in labs, you might have half of the students on campus while the other half are web streaming from a virtual platform. Students have agreed to comply with protective regulations, And for example, to maintain traffic management for those spaces that have narrow hallways, they have one-way path of travel. I provide these two examples just as a way to say that with employee and student safety, we have had an opportunity this semester to observe and certainly to learn and apply that in our spring semester planning. Next slide. In terms of spring scheduling considerations, it is guided by a commitment to ensure that student learning outcomes are met with integrity. SLOs for each class are determined by the faculty, and those will differ between disciplines and between the colleges. If a faculty member has determined that the student learning outcomes can be achieved virtually, then those classes will be scheduled online. If, on the other hand, they determine that hands-on training or face-to-face demonstration of proficiency is required, then those sections will be scheduled as hybrid. So whether they are synchronous, either full or partial, that in essence is an online class where students complete the course requirements on Canvas. It does require live stream meetings at specific dates and times as identified by the class schedule or the instructor. And then asynchronous is also an online class, also using Canvas as the way to complete course requirements. However, there are not scheduled, required scheduled live streaming sessions. Instead, students are engaged in a variety of activities like viewing pre-recorded lectures, videos, and it may involve some optional live streaming as determined by the faculty. Next slide. Last month in August, the California Department of Public Health and Cal OSHA released the industry guidance for institutions of higher education. I want to point out that this document acknowledges that phased reopening is going to be dependent on local conditions, similar to what Dr. Stern reviewed. Things and trends like new cases, positivity rates, hospitalization rates, and so forth. This plan calls for establishing written campus-specific COVID-19 prevention plans. It requires us to address the ways that we will be promoting healthy safety practices and healthy hygiene. It has guidance for cleaning, disinfectant, ventilation systems. It talks and requires us to have training for employees and students, and also includes an interim guidance for collegiate athletics. At IVC, for example, we are reviewing these guidelines on a weekly basis in our COVID-19 work group meetings, and we are preparing action items as a result of that review that may require follow-up or additional planning. Next slide. So both colleges for the spring term are preparing for some stepwise or gradual return if our conditions warrant. Each college is engaging in a prioritization of hybrid and synchronous classes, particularly the hybrid ones that faculty have determined do require some face-to-face in order to meet SLOs. Some of the considerations for prioritization are listed on the slide. So for those where hands-on learning is required, particularly for licensure, accreditation, or for certification, or those where hands-on learning requires the use of equipment to demonstrate proficiency, and that has to be done on campus, as well as those that cannot be fully virtualized to reach the learning objectives, or those that are requiring, for example, ensemble or team practices. Next slide. Some additional considerations include reviewing plans for the return of athletic programs. Again, that may or may not include competition. It may include skill training, possibly looking at skill development, conditioning. It should be noted that the CCC2A has not released any additional guidelines since their last publication in June. However, I did want to note that the California Community College Athletic Trainers Association came out with a very comprehensive report, which in essence is a set of guidelines and best practices that should serve as our guide for planning for possible return of athletics. Saddleback College Child Development Center may open if the community risk remains low. We're going to continue to fully engage in our virtual support services online for students, but we also want to begin conversations for the possible return of some support centers like health services or possibly learning support. And of course, as you saw in the budget presentation, we have taken significant loss of revenue because we have suspended all facility use agreements, but when the conditions are right, we hope to be able to proceed with some limited lease agreements. Next slide, I believe, Dr. Burke, I'm turning it over to you.
Yes, so it comes back to me, and of course, as we've been stating our case, classes could return to campus as conditions warrant. Governor Newsom likes to talk about toggling back and forth between purple and red and orange and so forth. I like to think of our case more like a window shade, with the shade completely closed and everything being virtualized. And then as conditions allow, we raise the shade and bring more and more classes and student activities and programs back to campus, maybe when we get into the yellow tier. The other thing that will play into this will be vaccine distribution. And when a vaccine does become widely available, we will have some questions to ask ourselves. We don't have the answers to these yet. We're still in the process of discussing them. If we allowed a portion of students to come back to campus to take classes face-to-face, will we require proof of vaccination or positive antibody status? And will we allow the opt-out? So there are still some questions that we have to answer internally and with staff and faculty about the process of bringing more classes back on campus. But just as our brethren are doing in the local universities or statewide universities and surrounding community colleges, our recommendation is that we remain mostly online for the spring semester, with many of the same classes that we have in the fall being on ground. And then if conditions permit, we can bring back more. So, and the next slide is are there any questions?
I don't see any hands yet. While people think, I do have a couple of questions myself. Obviously, there's been a lot of news lately about the idea of returning, and either Trustee Jay or Trustee Wright or both, could you please mute? There's a lot of background noise going on. Thank you. The idea of testing staff and or students before coming back in person, so that there's some sense that I mean, as best as possible, starting at a zero-sum game and then hope that nobody goes out and gets exposed after that. Do we have any concept or implementation of testing before they come back?
Well, we do daily temperature checks when they actually come on campus, and they have to get a wristband. I think that we explained that process to you, but not specifically testing. And I know, Dr. Stern, if you'd like to take that question a little further.
Sure. So both colleges are looking at testing devices that are available on the market for this purpose. One thing to think about, though, is the financial implication. The machine itself may be under $20,000, but each cartridge to run a test is about $20. So when we think about testing every student every day, that's a huge, huge financial ramification. Secondly, the kind of testing that's available for instant tests like these, so-called antigen tests, run a false positivity rate of about 16% right now. So that would mean turning away 16% of our students each day who actually are not sick with the disease, but who are testing positive. What's the implication for them missing class? So to be honest, I'm not super optimistic about using testing. I think we probably will end up being more online rather than relying on testing to bring more people back. we will probably rely on the community numbers to tell us when it's safe in the community, but still have all those prevention techniques in place so that even if people come on our campus who are positive, they're not going to be giving the disease to other students or our employees.
Thank you.
And then we also have the additional factor that because we're not a residential community, our students leave us and they do go back to their families. So if there's disease spread here and then we're spreading it back out into the community, that creates a number of issues.
Okay. Trustee Milchker.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Chancellor Burke for bringing this agenda item forward, because I think it's really important for the trustees to understand and know what's going on, you know, in the colleges, whether they'll be open or closed, and kind of have a say in what's going on. I think the decisions that are being presented to us are really excellent ones, really. I know President Stern and I both love the scientific aspects of the vaccine. You know, being a research biologist, you know, I've done a lot of research, a lot of studies on, you know, the 3 vaccines that they're working on. Of course, the Moderna, the Pfizer, which are both RNA vaccines, you know, ribonucleic acid one, and the AstraZeneca one, which is an adenovirus vaccine. But I won't go into that anymore, but it's really fascinating. They're talking about having a vaccine as early as the end of December, you know, like January 1st, maybe, you know, but of course they would have to give them to the healthcare workers first, and the people most at risk first. And in addition, they would have to, you know, people would have to take the vaccine. You know, you have to convince the 30% of the people that say they won't take it, or even more, to take it, to tell them that it's safe. But you know, right now, I've been doing a lot of reading about what other college campuses are doing, and like University of Alabama, they just opened up the college and they said they would test all the students before they went back to school. Well, they tested all the students at great expense 2 weeks before school started. That wasn't, they needed to test them like the day before school started. They had like these enormous outbreaks in their student body of COVID. And they read about some of the student situations. Some of the students, they couldn't go home, so they were isolated in apartments with no food, with nobody around them. Just, it was like terrible for these students. So I don't want to put students through anything like that. Of course, we're not residential, so we don't have that problem, which is really good. But I actually, you know, agree that starting slowly, and perhaps as the vaccine, you know, I think we're actually spending $1 billion on each of the 3 vaccines to produce a lot of vaccines. So there will be a lot of vaccines produced at first, but you know, that's still an unknown situation right now. So the idea of starting slowly and not putting anybody at risk, and then keeping our most essential classes open, but carefully, and you know, as things get better, perhaps can we move some of the classes that start out synchronous to on campus if things really get better quickly? That's question number 1. And then I think President Stern said about 5% of the classes are very, very carefully on campus now. What about IVC? Are any of those classes on campus now, or in the fall? I'm sorry, in the spring, excuse me. I guess those are my 2 main questions right now. Thank you.
To your first question, yes, if conditions are good, we can transition some of those online classes to face-to-face. This fall semester, IVC is not offering any face-to-face options. The deans are working with the faculty to do the prioritization based on some of the criteria that I shared in the PowerPoint slide, and we are anticipating that in the spring, we will have hybrid sections.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
2 quick things, Trustee Milchiker. One, as Dr. Hernandez said, we can bring the synchronous classes back. The synchronous classes have an assigned schedule for their Zoom sessions, so that schedule would just become an on-campus schedule. So they'd already have a schedule in hand with no conflicts. One other thing I wanted to mention to you, which is to reiterate something that Chancellor Burke said early in the presentation. You pointed out that we don't have the problems that the residential colleges do. In some way, we have a deeper a bigger problem with more awesome responsibility. Our students go home every night. Anything they catch on their campus, they take back to their contacts and to their community. We can't isolate them. So we have a higher threshold, a higher level of responsibility to keep them safe.
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
Okay. Trustee Lyon.
Yes, I just wanted to add my voice to the others that are supportive of the administration's recommendation that we operate for the most part virtually for spring semester. I think it's also wise that we don't go beyond that at this point if we don't have to, and leave it open as to whether that decision may change based upon where we're at as we start the spring semester prior to determining what we need to do for fall or summer. So.
Okay. Trustee Jamal.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, three of you, for the presentation. My question is, do we have a task force that's been established that are reviewing and making these decisions of whether we're going to bring back classes on campus and into the and our employees into the office environment? I know we're relying on the governor's guidance, but do we have like a task force that includes faculty or classified staff and the athletic directors or deans as well?
So I will start to say that each of the colleges have their own groups, and the college presidents can talk about those. And for district services, we have those conversations in our CEC, which is the Chancellor's Executive Cabinet meeting, which is all the vice chancellors and the college presidents. So Elliot or John, if you want to also chime in as to what your groups look like.
Sure. So there's a shared governance makeup group that we call the COVID Task Force, and that has a constituent group representatives from all areas of the college. Our task force also meets jointly with John's task force every other meeting so that we're working on these things in alignment. In addition to that, the instructional division has their own group called Instructional Continuity. They work on some of the class planning. And then finally, for day-to-day operations, each of us has an emergency operating command group and an emergency operating command policy team. John?
Ditto for IVC. Our COVID-19 work group is meeting weekly. It also has representatives from all the constituency groups, similar to Saddleback. And likewise, through some of the additional meeting structures like instructional council and so forth, these conversations are also being engaged in those settings.
All right.
And Chancellor's Executive Cabinet, when we first went into lockdown, if you will, we met 4 days a week, every week. And then as we've gotten more and more structures in place, we cut that back to 3 days a week and 2 days a week, and now we meet weekly.
Great, thank you. Thank God.
TJ, I'd like to.
Hold on, I've got people. Jim, you got to raise your hand in the participants. I've got people in front of you. Student trustee Monafi.
Council Dr. Stern managed for the presentation. My question is, so for classes that are coming back to on campus in the spring, the enrollment in these classes are to the capacity of rooms. So are we just planning to have half the capacity of rooms all the time on campus? Do we have the equipment to live stream all the lectures and all the labs? And how do we decide, like, do we do like half the students 1 week, half the students the other week, or students who want to be more cautious, they get to stay at home and just not to come on campus? Could you elaborate on that?
Trustee Manafi, I apologize. Your microphone is going in and out. I'm going to respond to the one piece I heard, which was something about live streaming, web streaming. So each of the colleges has installed hardware and software for live streaming labs and studios, and that will allow us to bring classes back at reduced capacity where half the class could be present to engage in a lab or other activity, and the other half to be watching, and then the instructor could rotate them out. So far we have those in 16 labs and studios, and we have plans to do them in another 10 to 20 over the course of the next few months in anticipation for spring. And Dr. Hernandez, I don't know if you are, I think you guys are doing the same thing.
We are, and I apologize also, I didn't understand the first part of your question, but to the prior statement, certainly for classes that are being, half on, face-to-face and half virtually, for those students who perhaps have a high risk factor or just don't have a comfort level, those students will have the opportunity to, in those specific examples, rather than alternating and coming face to face, to just do it virtually.
All right, thank you. Sorry for my connection. I don't know what's happening, but that answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Rydell.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to the weekly newsletters that we get, or I get from the presidents. And I just want to say, Dr. Stern, that I stay abreast with your summaries and also your analogies. And I just wanted to say thank you. I get inundated with so much on my iPhone, but I always look forward to your weekly, because that just summarizes what we really need to hear. I feel that you really have a pulse on the matter. Thank you.
Trustee Wright.
Yes, my question is the men's basketball team at IVC. Dr. Hernandez in his report says that the athletic department has already released the men's basketball spring schedule. Is that going to happen? And are you going to have basketball at
I think that's a little premature to know for certain. I think particularly when we talk about returning athletics, I think we have to differentiate between competition, and again, we're not sure what the CCC2A is proposing, let alone our local conference. What I believe we will probably begin to see is plans from our athletic departments for some possible reintegration that again might begin with some conditioning, skill development, and then if conditions warrant and if the plans follow the guidelines and that have been proposed, for example, by the Community College Athletic Trainers Association, then there may be an opportunity to resume competition. I think that's a little premature at this point. I don't feel, comfortable making that prediction just yet.
Because it said you had your men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, men and women's soccer, and men and women's volleyball as possible.
I think that's intended to be hopeful, but probably not likely.
Okay.
Okay, so no further requests to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on to consent calendar. Do I have any polls?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
I second.
All right, got a motion from Trustee Lang, second from Trustee Rydell. With no polls, we are voting on the entire consent calendar. Do I see anyone with a hand? No. Go ahead and call the vote.
TJ?
Aye.
Trustee Jamal?
Aye.
Trustee Lang?
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker?
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast?
Aye.
Trustee Rydell?
Aye.
Trustee Wright?
Aye.
Student Trustee Menefee?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Next, we move to 6.3, Stadium Site Improvement Project Approval of Settlement Agreement.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Trustee Jay, a second from Trustee Lang. Seeing no requests to speak, we got the update in closed session. And it's contingent on our vote. So with that, we'll go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
And Trustee Monafi.
Aye.
Next, we have 6.4 biennial ethics training.
So moved.
Second.
Chancellor, motion from Trustee Jamal, second from Trustee Wright. No discussion. We'll go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monafi.
Aye.
Okay, next we have 6.5 board policies for review and study.
Review tomorrow.
So moved.
I have a motion from Trustee Jay.
I'll second it. And then I had
Trustee Jamal, and then I have a hand from Trustee Lang.
and I have a hand as well. So I'll raise it.
Yes, thank you. My comment is regarding revised board policy. Looks like 2720 under the new numbering system. And the issue that I have has to do with the language in the first paragraph, where it basically forbids the board to not communicate among themselves in order to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on, in lieu of what we had before, which was reach a collective concurrence regarding. My specific issue with that is was actually demonstrated by a communication that I had earlier today with Board President Prendergast and Chancellor and the Chancellor that had to do with some an email that I sent expressing some views in which I was copying our board president really as a courtesy. And frankly, I don't think that that ought to be something that would, well, I would view that as something that would be banned under the revised language of this policy, but permitted under the earlier language that we had. So I'd like to see that changed back to the wording, the existing wording, and from the suggested wording that's in there.
I guess in reading this, I don't know if it accomplishes either one of what you're asking for, Trustee Lang, and that what you did was basically just give the Chancellor and myself a heads up on what your intended. You weren't asking us to help you decide on anything. You weren't asking us to try and sway anybody. You were just informing us, which I think is
correct. But it was in the, I guess you could read the discuss part of that, depending on how you interpret that. And I just don't want there to be a matter of interpretation on something like this.
I think the danger of it was if I replied back to you with my own ideas, that becomes a discussion. I just thanked you for the info. So I think the danger is if there's an actual discussion. You sending an FYI, it's kind of like when people would send questions and then the Chancellor would disseminate what the questions were and the answers to the questions to everyone, so everyone could see what other trustees were asking. That was okay. And I don't know if that gets eliminated by either.
Again, I think it's questionable. And in order to eliminate any ambiguity, I thought the language we had earlier regarding not reaching a collective concurrence is more clear.
Okay. Can we hear anybody from the process?
Trustee Prendergast, if I may, the language that we have here is the language that was recommended by the CCLC Board Policy and Administrative Procedures policies, the samples that they have. In looking at the government code that applies to this, the language is consistent with the government code. The only thing that is different is the word here, H-E-A-R, does not appear in the government code, but discuss, deliberate, or take action on does appear in the government code. So those changes are a direct quote from the government code. I'm not quite sure. Well, actually, here is there also. So it is a direct quote from government code section 54952.2.
Yeah, the word that stood out to me was here, Anne Marie, but you just cited it, that it's in the code.
Yes, it is.
So Trustee Lang, let me suggest it could read, in order to hear, discuss, deliberate, take action on, or reach a collective concurrence regarding.
Or doesn't really do it because it's not an inclusive, or it's not inclusive of all of those requirements. So I'm not sure that I wouldn't have been in violation of that language. And frankly, it's probably not going to affect me, but I just don't want it to be so restrictive that some other board member is going to, get in trouble down the road for this, when clearly I don't think that's what the intention is. And again, this is for information only. So I would just ask you to perhaps further deliberate on this in terms of, where we may want to go with this.
Okay. Trustee Jamal?
Not on this. Do you want to finish or?
No,
Okay.
Dave, did you have others?
No, I think I'm done. I expressed my issue.
So are you?
Go ahead.
Can you speak on this, Tim?
No, I'm speaking on another board policy, BP 2740.
But in this group?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I think I have a minor change that's more a wordsmith edit. And it has to do board policy 2740, Roman numeral 1C, just to make some slight revisions to the language. And that currently reads newly elected board officers, including the board president, will receive, and then my change would be, after the word receive, insert training on the board president responsibilities and expectations within 45 days. And then after that, the language is the same. And I think I had a communication with, a permitted communication with Anne Marie and the chancellor today. And I think this is acceptable, might be acceptable to them. It was a little clunky the way it read before.
Anyone?
So do you understand the change?
Yes.
Okay.
So it would read, newly elected board officers, including the board president, will receive training on board president responsibilities and expectations within 45 days after they become the new board president. And did we want to add at the end of that, or officer, since we're doing the training for all of them?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep, 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 yep.
Okay.
And then this.
So we'll bring that back at the next meeting with that wording change.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. I need to suspend discussion.
Oh, I moved to extend the meeting to 10:15 p.m.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to extend the meeting to 10:15. And then we'll resume discussion on this item. Go and vote.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee
I didn't hear that.
Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student trustee Monacy.
Aye.
Okay, back to 6.5. Trustee Jamal, you had more?
No, that's it. So, Anne-Marie, you going to bring this language back? The modified?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll come back as an action item at the October board meeting with the revisions that you just suggested tonight.
Thank you.
Trustee Rydell.
I just wanted to dovetail on David's communication regarding 2720. I really strongly feel that we should return to the search of a collective concurrence. And I really think that that wording should go in. I understand that the other wording goes along with our different associations, but for me, that is more encompassing. That's all I wanted to say.
If I may ask a question, so the change that we have proposed is to make our language consistent with what the government code section says. So is the board advising that we change back to our old language and therefore not be in compliance, well, not really not in compliance, but not be in agreement with the language that is in government code?
Anne-Marie, I on this one, I don't think that it would be a problem when you say the language with the government. We're 99% in with the language of the government. We are.
I'll comment on that if I still can.
Okay.
And that is that I think there is a difference between communications that are made to reach a collective concurrence, which is what the Brown Act is all about, and the more encompassing language that you have here in hearing, discussing, deliberating, or taking action on. I feel that that's too restrictive and gave you, I think, what a perfect example of an instance in where somebody could be I guess innocently, in my view, be in violation of the policy. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I think the issue with it is it doesn't seem to take into account the number of people talking about something other than the serial communication. That I think they're both right in that the Brown Act issue is coming up with a concurring agreement on an issue, but outside of a board meeting. But the way the language reads from the government code, it makes it sound like two of us could never actually have a conversation about something. And I don't think there's any violation for Trustee Lang to send me a message if I don't share it with other board members or then turn and ask other board members. That becomes the serial communication, and that's dealt with in the language. And I think there's
you hit the nail on the head. That's my issue.
And I think there's a potential to do, I think what Trustee Lang was kind of suggesting is to have both. Keep the government code in a way that, like wordsmith it in a way that it works with the original language. I just don't know how to do it.
I don't think you wanted both, did you, David?
Pardon me?
You didn't want both, did you? No.
Suggested both.
Well, no.
Somebody else did.
I think there would be a way to probably wordsmith this as TJ has suggested in order to make it acceptable. But it's going to take some additional work.
So
and the time is there to do that.
Yeah, this is review and study. I highly recommend, I understand what you're saying, Trustee Lang and TJ, on this issue. However, this is a very important and sensitive issue. So, and I think this is an issue there's existing language that exists in code and from the league, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. So I think this is for review and study, and I'd be very careful and caution against making changes that is at any variance with the code at all.
Okay. I mean, you're on that committee, so you went over this, I'm sure.
I'm not recalling. I think when the Vice Chancellor says this is in code, we accept it. That's a part of our obligation as trustees.
Well, no, time out a minute here. Our obligation as trustee is to make sure that we're passing proper board policy.
Part of our obligation is to comply with the code.
Okay, then we should get copies of the code from which this comes from so that we can independently look at that.
I can send you all copies of the code before our next meeting.
That'd be great.
All right. Any other discussion on 6.5?
No.
So going on vote on accepting for reviewing study.
TJ,
Aye.
Trustee Jamal,
Aye.
Trustee Lang,
Question. The action says first reading information only. So is it appropriate for us to be voting on this?
you're accepting them for review and study.
Okay, but that's not what the action says.
The item 6.5 action says first reading information only.
So Anne-Marie, I asked you about this at our board policy session, and you told me that it means the same thing as review and study. We asked you specifically about the use of that language, first reading. Well, so that issue did come up, the use of that language. Why was it phrased like that as opposed to review and study? And
well, all right. So assuming it is subject to a vote, I will say aye.
But yeah, like I said, that's what they told us during our subcommittee discussion.
What did they tell you, that you don't have to vote on the?
No, about that first, what is it? First reading?
Yeah, first reading information only.
That it means the same thing as accepting for, in a sense, as accepting for review and study. That's what we were told.
Oh, so did they say to vote on it or not to vote on it?
Well, we're voting on it.
No, we are. But I thought that was the question.
Oh, I went blank. Oh.
We're voting for accepting for review and study.
Okay.
The language in the action is different than the vote study.
Oh.
What a night.
Yeah,
An interesting night.
I lost them, but they lost us.
Yeah, they lost us.
We can't help them.
I'm back.
We hear you, Trustee Jay.
Okay. Should I just put my?
Is Vice Chancellor Bob Ramucci still in participants? Let me see. Maybe he can help.
Well, but he's there.
Well, maybe he can help.
But you don't think he already knows? He's in.
He may know, but can he help?
You're wrong.
Okay, so
Let's do it by phone.
I think everyone can hear us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So do you want to just, we need to take the roll call. I was gonna say we could continue with the agenda because it's still public.
That's true.
But
the only problem is we can't unmute any attendees ourselves because we're not the hosts.
Oh, right.
So if we need to ask a question or somebody wants to make a comment, we can't let them.
TJ, can you call in and then just leave your speaker on?
They're texting me that they're trying to. That's
Okay.
I think one thing we can do is continue the roll call, because it's not just us. Like you said, the public can hear us.
Yeah, we can be heard.
And we left off at Trustee Lang, who said aye.
I think you can call the roll. I think that's okay.
That's exactly what I'm doing. It's exactly what I'm doing. Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
And I myself say aye. Student Trustee Munafee.
Aye.
All right, so when they come back, we'll indicate a reading of a unanimous vote. They're logging back in.
Before we were so rudely cut off, I responded to Trustee Lang's question by saying the vote on this item, 6.5, is just for the board to accept the policies for review and study. It's not an approval of the policy.
Right, we understood that, but the language in the item itself says the action is the first reading. The action doesn't match the vote.
I said this a couple times. Anne Marie, when this issue came up in our board policy subcommittee, I asked you about that language of first reading, and you guys said it is the same meaning as accepting for review and study.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That's it. That's just one clarification on that.
All right, 6.6. Yeah, motion.
Yeah, I think you need to explain that we took a vote.
Oh yeah, we voted while you were out. The public heard that it was unanimous with a student trustee advisory vote. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 6.6. Need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Trustee Wright, second from Trustee Milchiker. Any discussion? Trustee Long.
Yes, thank you. Despite the arrogant, rude, and militant comments that we heard from faculty earlier this evening, I wanted to make a couple of comments regarding this. Obviously, we do have certain board responsibilities. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank the Board Policy Review Subcommittee of our board for the action that they took in bringing us the revised Board Policy 6140 previously. I think you do us a service by reviewing these policies and bringing them back to us for discussion. I understand that the academic senates are not happy about the revised policy that was made, but we've got other board policies, which I think if certain members of faculty bothered to read, they would better understand what the roles of the trustees are, several of which are for advocating and protecting the district and also representing the public interest. I think our board has consistently exercised its authority in respectfully deferring to faculty in responsibility for curriculum and program development, and honored the college's long history of fostering free speech and academic freedom. Under the current district process, speakers are approved, not just ratified, by the Board of Trustees. Apparently, this includes both speakers invited to speak and/or who have spoken at the colleges and/or ATEP since the last board meeting. Any travel expenses and honorariums of speakers must be recommended by the chancellor or college president and submitted to the board prior to reimbursement of travel expenses or payment of honorariums. You'll see if you, in 5.3 tonight, all the presentation dates are future dates, the closest being October 21st of 2020. The only change that I could determine that BP 6140 makes was to mandate that speakers be approved in advance by this board. Frankly, I think that's good policy, and we shouldn't abdicate good policy. First of all, it saves embarrassment and possible litigation if the board chooses for a good reason not to approve travel expenses or honorariums for speakers approved by the faculty, with or without approval by others. Rejection of such expenses and fees only occur, in my view, under exceptional circumstances and for compelling reasons. I think there are another reason is that we have a duty to protect our students, members of the community, and all of our employees. And we should be able to look at speakers that come to our sites and make certain that they don't represent a clear and present danger to folks. So for these reasons, I'm reluctant to go back to the old board policy 6140, but would be willing at least to consider revising the policy if I know that it will in fact come back to the board. So that's essentially my feelings about this matter, and I feel very strongly about it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. I do think it's worth noting that these are board policies and ultimately that we stamp our name on them. And speaking of stamp, Trustee Jamal has mentioned on more than one occasion that he's been approached by people saying that all we do is rubber stamp everything and we never say no. But these are our policies and we have to be understanding and accepting of them. So it absolutely is within the job description of the board, as was quoted earlier, to enact good policies. That does not mean we have to take recommendations from committees, which is all they are, is recommendations. We have the right to say no since they are our policies. That being said, I too agree that we are in, doing the right thing by putting this back on the drawing board and figuring out how we can come into an agreement on it. But the shots fired that attack this board probably not going to ingratiate us to anything other than what has been discussed in previous meetings. And I think it's very clear that everyone understands that my feelings on this, if you look back at those old meetings, I was in agreement with the faculty on some of these things. And now I'm not so happy, but I will vote yes on this. Trustee Rydell.
Yes, I just would like to make us all aware that we really have approved their speakers, because we have approved a budget to the college, and the college then divides their budget. The president decides here, there, and there, and we have approved that amount of money to all the programs. How they choose to spend it, I believe faculty have that right. And then I do believe that they are under the guidance of their president, and I am certain that he or she would know exactly who and where and what comes. I'm certain that the presidents also receive a copy of this from the different programs, or it's talked about in their meetings. And so I don't know why we're making such a big deal about this right now. I was thinking about cost, because the buck stops with us. And if that program, that department wants to spend $10,000 on a speaker and they have the money to do it, and that's how they choose to do it, I hope they wouldn't, but I think that is their right. I do. And it must be something very important. I understand I wouldn't spend that kind of money because we're not an Ivy League school where we would have thousands and thousands of people coming. At that point in time, when you're spending that kind of money, you want a huge audience. So I don't think our faculty would do that. And again, the one person that we had in question, the gentleman from LA, I forget his name, he was very good. And again, I was a bit embarrassed that I was against that at the beginning because of money. And we need to respect our faculty. They know what they're doing. And so far, they have produced excellent community members. And that's what we're here for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me add, I know it's late, but since I was on the board policy subcommittee, I think that I support it going back. I think we can reach in a policy that makes sense. I think that I don't think that it's our job to decide to approve a speaker, this speaker or that speaker. I think the issue is transparency on funds that are spent. If the funds are part of the college budget, then that's fine. I have no interest, zero, in restricting academic freedom or selecting a speaker. That's not our job. I don't view that as our job at all. I've never viewed it as our job. I used to walk around with the First Amendment or Die slogan in my back pocket every day. So I think, and that goes along the lines of with academic freedom. So I don't think that's it. That's the issue at hand. And I think we'll figure this out.
Well said.
Trustee Melchiker?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say that I had prepared about an hour and a half rebuttal to the president of the IVC Academic Senate, who excoriated the board over and over again, really very meanly, without any, it was like no reason. And I could go into why there was no reason to blame the board for all that. I don't think that she's here. I think she left immediately after she did that. So, because her name was gone from the attendees list immediately. So I think I'll save my rebuttal until when I see her maybe in person, and I could tell her in person. But it was really very, very unfair the way the board was excoriated in that way, because this is the best board I've ever served on. We have a good board, a hardworking board that work hard into the night, even if she went home right away. I am going to vote to approve the rescinding and to bring it back again and to make the policy so that we could all approve it, I hope, in some way, so we all can agree on it. I myself have looked up Title V. And I spent a lot of time reading about the Academic Senate, what the rule for what they are in charge of. And so I did a lot of research on this issue as well, but I won't go into that right now. But for now, I'm going to vote to accept the rescinding and go back to the board again. I just also want to say that when we got the last iteration of this board policy, we never got it in a review and study. We never got that one in a review and study, ever. That was the first time we saw it for acceptance. And not only that, that policy was not sent to the BPARC committee before the board got it. And that's what they were so mad about. It's not the board's fault that didn't happen. So, I just had to get that off my chest. Thank you.
Okay, we have a request to speak from David Lang.
Only thing that I'm looking for, and it's somewhat stated in the status of this item, but it's not explicitly stated in the recommendation, and that is to make certain that this board policy does come back to the board after further consideration. It's not in the recommendation now. I'd like to add that language to it.
Okay.
I think it has to come back to the board.
Yeah, it
Dave,
will.
review and study, Dave?
Pardon me?
First for review and study, and then for the final. Then at the next meeting for the final.
Right. At some point, I'm looking for this to come back to the board.
Because
And
the
I
way
want to
it was-
see that incorporated in the recommendation.
The way it was brought so quickly to the board without any review and study, without any review by the BPAR.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I'll be quiet. Sorry.
We need to move on.
Okay. Sorry.
I have a request to speak from Dan Walsh.
Speaking as the Saddleback College Academic Senate representative to the Board Policy Committee, we are advocating for this to come back to the Board Policy Committee and to come back to the board itself. So that is part of our plan. It was never to just throw it out and ignore it. It is to fix the problem and to find a mutually agreeable position for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So with that, I think we can go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monacy.
Aye.
All right. I now need a motion and second to extend the meeting again.
I move to extend the meeting to
I second.
10:45 p.m.
10:45?
Yes.
All right.
Wow.
Go ahead and call the vote.
You beat your own record.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monacy.
Aye.
Okay, 6.7, academic employee and classified administration personnel actions. Any changes?
Move approval.
I second it.
A motion from trustee Jay, a second from trustee Wright. Are there any changes?
No changes, trustee Prendergast.
Thank you. Go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monacy.
Aye.
All right, 6.8, classified personnel actions. Any?
No changes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion from trustee Mulchker, second from trustee Jay. Not seeing request to speak, we'll go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monacy.
Aye.
6.9, non-bargaining unit personnel action. Any changes?
No changes.
Except
So
for
moved.
review and study.
Okay, I got a motion from trustee Lang, I think,
Yes.
and a second from trustee Wright. And this is 6.9. It's not for review and study. It's the non-bargaining unit
Oh,
personnel.
okay, right, sorry. Approval.
All right. Seeing no requests, to speak,
Ratification.
we'll vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student Trustee Monacy.
Aye.
Okay, 6.10, Faculty Association initial proposal of the district for review and study.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion from trustee Lang, a second from trustee Rydell. Seeing no request to speak, we'll go ahead and vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student trustee Bonifay.
Aye.
All right, 6.11, the district's initial proposal to the Faculty Association
Move approval.
for review. and-
Second.
Motion from trustee Lang, second from trustee Jay. No request to speak, we'll vote on the item.
Trustee Jay.
Aye.
Trustee Jamal.
Aye.
Trustee Lang.
Aye.
Trustee Milchiker.
Aye.
Trustee Prendergast.
Aye.
Trustee Rydell.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Student trustee Bonifay.
Okay, now we have reports. There's no 7.1. Teacher of the Year ceremony recognition. Obviously, due to the pandemic, it's a very different way to celebrate. Certainly, we appreciate and congratulate our faculty members being honored. Emily Quinlan, business law instructor, and Leonard Lamp, mathematics instructor at IVC. So that's good news. 7.3, facilities plan status report. Any questions or notifications on that?
I would just like to comment. Thank you very much, Anne Marie. I know this is a lot of work. Well, I just wanted to let you know that I do enjoy looking at this and seeing when we're going to have some completion, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
7.4, sorry. 7.4 CARES Act funding monthly summary. Anyone?
Can I just ask real quick, when is the year up for the CARES, or the date for the, is it March, or the time that we got the money?
For the grant portion,
Yeah.
the grants to the students, the grant period ends April 23rd, 2021.
Okay.
For the institutional portion, the grant period ends May 6th of 2021. And for the minority serving institutions, that grant period ends May 31st, 2021.
Thank you.
Good question. That was my question too, Terry.
Okay.
Good.
7.5, COVID-19 response block grant money summary. Monthly summary, sorry. 7.6, retiree OPEB trust fund report. Moving on to written reports. Does anyone have anything to highlight or add to the written report verbally?
I would just add also my thoughts about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Without her, I wouldn't be in this seat.
Aw.
Okay.
Yeah, she was an amazing woman.
So with that, we'll segue into our adjournment in honor of a great American public servant that will be sorely missed.
Yep.